Good evening, everybody. How are you? So I'm Pat Moore, Chair of Equality of Life, and Mariama James is on also. She's co-chair. Um, we've got a couple of topics tonight. We have some young people who live in our community with everything that's going on in our country and the world right now. We'd like to have a discussion about, it might take many directions. I'm not even sure what direction it will take. I think we should just leave it open and everybody to just participate and say what they have to say. But everyone knows that there's legislation that's pending to possibly send money, use the money that the police have to put into other avenues, and not necessarily the police would not necessarily get all of the money, all the funding that they get, because maybe we don't need a police officer to respond to every call. And so everyone's been watching the news, everyone's been watching TV, we know what's going on. I'm going to turn over the discussion right now to our two young people who brought it to our committee. Taylor and Katie, are you on the line?
Yes.
Who am I speaking to? Taylor or Katie?
Yeah, so Taylor has the presentation. I'm waiting for her to pull that up and get that started. Sorry.
I just want to say one other. On our agenda, it's item 3. We're moving up to number 1. And I got a few calls about the title of this agenda, which is Addressing Systematic Racism and White Supremacy in Battery Park City. And a request was made that we change this white supremacy because that sounds like it's a neo-Nazi group. And so maybe just addressing systematic racism and what changes we might like to see take place and take out the terminology white supremacy. All right?
Yeah, thank you for that. Sorry, we're going to be presenting on just generally what's been happening, our personal take on it, and what we're trying to do and get others to do to help in this whole movement and process. So thank you for that introduction.
Good. So why don't you start by telling everyone who you are and where you live and how you approached the community board to bring this topic to our community.
Katie, I think, is waiting for Taylor to speak. So Taylor, I think you need to speak up.
Taylor, are you there? Taylor and Katie, are you together or you are separate?
They're in separate places, and I saw her, and now she's gone.
Taylor needs to be unmuted. She's in the attendee list.
I think you got to put her back. Maybe she fell off and then came back up. Sorry. There you go.
Hear me now?
Yes, now we can.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, there was something wrong with technically. Okay. Thank you so much. Hello. I'm really, really grateful you guys gave us the opportunity to talk here, and thank you everyone on this committee for all the work you do. You've made this place a wonderful place to live, so really thank you. Katie and I would like to share a little presentation we've been putting together. Please bear with us. We're a little nervous. Okay. Lucian, how do I share this? How do I share this? Do I have access?
Yeah, you have presenter controls.
Okay.
What you would do is on the bottom of your screen, there's a number of circles. One of them has the square with the little arrow pointing up to the top.
Yeah.
Next to your camera. Click on that and then either share screen or share a specific application.
Okay. I'm going to have to, it's going to make me close up the app and log back in. I'm so sorry. It won't. I'll be right back.
You share? Okay.
In the meantime, I think that
Umberto's on, I believe.
Oh, well, we could have Taylor and Katie work out their technical difficulty and go to Umberto if he's on. Mariama?
Yes, that's fine by me.
That's
You brought
cool.
this. Okay, so Mariama, since you brought this topic to the committee, would you like to go ahead and chair at this moment?
Okay, well, yes, I did bring the topic, but admittedly, I'm not very well versed in it, which is why I was, really wanting to have a representation from DEP. So thank Umberto greatly for coming. My concern in having received some information through other committees with related to 9/11 health was that it had been put on the radar that there are some concerns with sewer overruns and our beach water, our swimming water, our rivers, and just inviting Umberto to help us to understand what that's about.
Great. So I'm going to find Umberto. He's on the phone. Let me just see if I can find him. Hi, Umberto. Is this you?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Okay. Oh, so you can hear me, right? Okay. Thank
Can.
you.
Welcome.
I appreciate that, and thank you all, Lucian, the committee, all members. Obviously, thank you for your community service as well. So my name is Umberto Galarza. I'm with Department of Environmental Protection, Public Affairs. So thank you for this opportunity. Just very briefly, I provided Lucian with some links on combined sewer overflows information and beach season information. So just in case, if you want to go over it after our discussion, you can ask Lucian, and I'm sure he can forward that to you all. But all that information can also be found on our DEP website. For the interest of time, I'll just say a couple things. Briefly, DEP's job is to mitigate the combined sewer overflows. Basically, according to the consent agreement that we have with the state, which is the Environmental Conservation, short for DEC. Basically, about 60% or most of our sewer, wastewater, rainwater collection system, if you will, is combined, meaning that there is one sewer pipe, right, which carries the sewage from all the properties, whether it's businesses or residential units, and it also carries the stormwater runoff, rainwater, to one of our 14 wastewater treatment facilities that we have in New York City. In some areas, you have two pipes, which is the more ideal situation, which means that you have two pipes on the street. One carries the sewage, like I said, from residential and businesses, and it takes that sewage to our wastewater treatment plant directly. And then there's a second pipe, which we call a stormwater pipe, which would, during rainfall, carry that water into the receiving bodies of water. Basically, back to the combined sewer outfalls, short we call it CSOs. During a heavy rainstorm, we receive higher than normal flows of rainwater. And if you combine that with the sewage that we release from the residential units and the businesses, it's too much for the wastewater treatment plant to handle at one time in a short period of time. As you know, as you've noticed with the weather forecast, that with the weather here in New York City, it's actually been more rainfall, but heavier and shorter, but more frequent, as in years past. So if you have that combination of flows in a short period of time, it actually it overflows the capacity of our wastewater treatment, meaning that it can't treat all that sewage that is receiving combined with the rainwater. Therefore, the reason we call it combined sewer outfalls is because we release some of that water into the receiving bodies of water. And if in situations when we have rainstorms, those are times that we try to maximize our operations or our inspections to make sure that the city sewers are running properly. There's no clogs, no sewer, clogs that can cause sewer backups into properties, but also to maintain a good flow into the wastewater treatment plant. As we know, we don't want this wastewater going onto the receiving bodies of water because it can create a bad situation for recreational use. And I'm sure that's what you're referring to here. As you know, we have standards, regulations from the state that mandate us to make sure that we improve the water quality in these waterways. Therefore, DEP continues to improve the water quality by improving our wastewater treatment plants. We've either upgraded or continued to invest in upgrading our wastewater treatment plants. For example, in Community Board 1, we have some sewage, wastewater, and rainfall that goes to our Newtown Creek, which is located in Brooklyn. And then some on the more west side, they go to our North River plant, which is on the upper west side in Manhattan. Now, the Newtown Creek is a much bigger, newer plant, which can basically have a higher capacity than most. So basically, you're in a good area here in terms of drainage and treatment of the wastewater. But like I said before, we continue operations in terms of installing new sewer mains, making sure that we review operations in the wastewater treatment plants, in addition to long-term control plans that we have agreed to with the state, as I mentioned before. Those could be either, as we call, gray infrastructure or green infrastructure. Gray infrastructure meaning more pipes, more filtration plants. And whereas the green infrastructure, meaning more green rain gardens, as we like to call it, whereas we plant more trees and more plants and more green catch basins, if you will, instead of catch basins that you see in the street corners. Basically just as a sponge to absorb the rainwater as it is raining. The basic idea of that is to contain the rainwater as is raining, so you don't so the city sewer on the street does not go over its design capacity. So if you're holding on to water in certain areas, it's not going into the city sewer. That's what I meant to say. If you're delaying the channeling of the rainfall into the city sewer and then into the wastewater treatment plant, it allows the wastewater treatment plant to treat the receiving wastewater that it can handle. So that's one way that we are basically helping improving the waterways within these New York City areas. Just a couple of, and I don't want to take too long, I know you have other agenda items and I know you have questions, but now that I hear that there's there's obviously committee members, just a couple of simple things that I think are very helpful, especially in what we are all going through right now. But I'll start with one. We have a program which is called WAIT, which we've been working in Queens and Brooklyn, but it's very, very important that, which any one of us can use. Basically, it means that when we have a heavy rainstorm, I would suggest and hope that everyone can participate. Whereas if you are listening to the news and you hear that in the weather news that there's going to be a rainstorm, what I suggest is when it is occurring that you all wait in terms of using large amounts of water. Basically, wait to take a shower, or wait to turn on the dishwasher, or wait to wash clothes, and etc. Because those are appliances and uses of high volume of water, which ultimately goes into the city sewer, and as I stated before, can cause flow overcapacity issues. The second thing, which is important right now, and we obviously are all dealing with COVID, and we, as DEP, the agency ensures that we make sure that, we provide you with clean and safe drinking water, but at the same time, we're all using disinfectant wipes. I know I am at home. We want to make sure that we're clean, and we try to protect ourselves. But those, whether it's wet wipes, disinfectant wipes, it would be very, very helpful if that is disposed of in the trash instead of down the drain. That can cause problems not only internally with your plumbing at home, but also with the wastewater treatment plant, as it damages our equipment. And not only that, but it also delays our operations. It's actually a costly endeavor to eliminate all the disinfectant wipes, the wet wipes, yearly. So I would advise also that, as we're using gloves too, to dispose of it in the trash cans if possible when you are out and about. As I've seen, obviously it's hard to, keep trash with you or litter. But it would be very, very helpful if you maintain it until you get home or you see a trash can, because if you do litter, again, the litter goes into our catch basins, which is connected to our city sewer. And again, let's say during a rainstorm, the litter, there is a possibility that it may end up in our waterways. And to connect to the beach topic, these waterways also connects to the beach, the beaches that we have in New York City. So you don't want to have a trip to the beach in New York City and you see all these kinds of litters, whether it's bottles or, potato chip bags or gloves, and that kind of situation. So that would greatly, greatly help us out. Just a minor fun facts, I guess. We handle about 1.3 billion gallons of wastewater each day. In terms of the CSOs, we have about 700 of them throughout the city. Basically, you can note or see them usually near our wastewater treatment plants, which are 14 around New York City. And along those lines, again, water quality is a high priority for us. The waterways are of high quality, better than 100 years ago, ever since the Clean Water Act from 1972. Basically, we try to sample the waterways as often as possible. We have a mechanism of having boats that can test the waters. That information is also in our DEP website, which we call the Harbor Survey. So again, I emphasize that this information can be found in our DEP website. And yes, we do, like I said before, we follow state guidelines to make sure that the waterways are safe and clean, but there are some classifications, another fact here, that the state designates. So for example, I think in Community Board 1 here, where you are part of the New York Harbor, the Inner Harbor. We basically have a water quality area here in our harbor, which is called which we test Hudson River and Upper New York Bay. And this area is classified as fishing and boating. Lastly, I'm sorry, I do ramble, but I'll open myself up to questions. But lastly, in terms of swimming and beach season, I did include that in the email that I sent to Lucian. Basically, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene also does their own testing of the waterways, of beaches, excuse me, and they are the primary agency which notifies the citizens, of the residents, of the quality of the beach, of the beaches, and basically provide advisories. We, as DEP here, we also provide advisories, but on the waterways. So that information, again, can also be found in our DEP website. It's very, very extensive. We try to do real time, but also if you go to Notify NYC, you can also receive alerts to our water body advisories. So if you go, for example, to our DEP website and you look at, you type in water body advisories, you'll be able to see, for instance, the Inner Harbor area, and look up Hudson River, and you would see that there is no alert, no advisories at this time. I'm sorry I rambled and I took a little longer, but I'll be happy to take any questions. If not, I can always ask our DEP staff.
That's great. Thank you. Mariama, did you want to ask questions?
I can't see the list of people who may want to ask questions because I'm still out. I'm on my phone.
No. So do you have questions?
I would ask. So we have a large population of 9/11 survivors, people dealing with different health conditions that, resulting from 9/11, and that was one of the reasons that I wanted to make sure that we went over this topic. Thank you. That we discussed this topic. My question would be if there are any additional precautions that we should be taking in that respect, given COVID and this everything that's happening right now.
Okay, in terms of recreational use, or are you talking about visiting a beach?
Use. With summer being upon us, and obviously we can't go in the water yet in New York City.
Right.
But people are going to beaches, so we're still, being near the water. Is that okay? Should we be further concerned, like I said, if we have some sort of pre-existing condition, maybe that perhaps we shouldn't even go to the beach at all?
Yes. Okay. So again, I apologize for rambling, and I wasn't exactly sure of what I was trying to give some general information, but I can definitely answer your question. So, and I'll start off by one other note in terms of New York City drinking water supply. It is safe to drink. The COVID-19 is not a waterborne illness, so there is no concerns in terms of your drinking water. Regarding recreational activities, I understand everybody wants to go outside, and obviously we're moving into phase 2 in New York City. In terms of DEP, what we're tasked to do is make sure that the waterways around the city, New York City, are up to the standards of the state. Regarding the beaches, the Department of Health has that delegation of making sure that they test and that they provide you with the information, and also determining whether or not the beaches can be opened or not. If there was an issue with the beaches in terms of the water quality, the Department of Health would have to send out an advisory, and in a situation like that, they would delay the opening of the beaches. But again, in terms of the beaches in particular, that is under the realm of Department of Health and also Parks Department in terms of maintenance and et cetera. But the water quality is done by Department of Health. But as I said before, the waterways around New York City is cleaner than it's ever been before. And I urge everyone to take a look at our DEP website. But again, your area, as I stated before, is CB1, the Hudson River area. That's classified by the state as a boating and fishing area. Now, I know that there's other recreational activities. I mean, I have a friend who, helps with the boathouse, and they do canoeing, and I'm sure there's people that swim throughout the Hudson River and et cetera. But that is not for us to, determine or advise people that they can or cannot.
Umberto, I follow up on that. So I think I saw a story on New York One, and maybe I'm mistaken, and maybe I'm correct, but they were mistaken. I thought I saw a story that said that COVID had been found living in some runoff water. And you just said that COVID is not waterborne, and therefore we don't have to worry about it. And so I guess, did you see that story on New York One or anyone else?
Did see the same story, and I also shared, when I initially learned of this topic, I shared an article where it had been found in water in Chicago.
Yeah, and can I add something, Pat and Mariama, that I just shared in the chat, that there's a webinar tomorrow on this very topic on COVID-19 detection in wastewater streams as a way of an advance warning. So I would love it if that could be addressed here, Umberto. And thank you all for this this important topic.
Yes, thank you. And if I could just finish by saying that you're referring to wastewater, not waterways, where we've had conversations with the Manhattan Borough President's Office where we are gearing up to test for the COVID in our wastewater, and that would be able to help us to track and trace. But in terms of the waterways, that is not, I believe, what you were referring to.
Doesn't our wastewater go to the same, what are they called, plants, the purification plants, treatment plants?
Yes, that's correct. But you're referring to waterways in terms of the rivers, like the Hudson rivers, or you're talking about, because the news articles, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. We thought that we heard COVID had been found in wastewater.
That is correct, but I'm sorry. I thought the issue of the agenda item here was wastewater. I'm sorry, waterways, like the rivers and also the beaches. But yes, it can be traced in wastewater, and that is something that DEP is looking into and working on.
Okay, and so
in our wastewater treatment facilities.
Right.
So in other words, it has been found in water treatment facilities.
What I read, she was asking if it has been found in wastewater facility treatment plants.
So what scientists are saying is that the COVID or the SARS-2 can be traced, can be found in our wastewater or in our in our sewage, in our waste. And that's something that we can use. We can go into our wastewater treatment facilities and test, so then that can help us to test and trace, so we know what areas are or can be or are likely to be in danger of COVID, or we can tell trace the high volumes of cases of COVID.
So Pat, if I can ask,
I'm sorry, if it's in the wastewater and it goes to the treatment plant, in the treatment plant, can the COVID be removed from the water?
Killed?
So, right. So again, it's traces in sewage that we can look at and test. It's in the early stages. We do a treatment of the wastewater where there's chlorination, there's there's organisms that we have that kill the bacteria, and basically there's several steps of our treatment in our wastewater treatment facilities that we are mandated as the city and state to do in order to treat the wastewater before and rainfall before it is released into the waterways. And I think what you're referring to in the news is the tracing and the testing of the sewage to determine if there is COVID in certain areas of the city.
Then asking is, if the tests prove that there is COVID in the water, can it be removed? Or what then happens to the water that's contaminated with COVID?
Again, so we're in early stages of this process. We're working with a couple of universities to help us with this study. But this is early stages where we're gearing up that we hope to have in our 14 wastewater treatment plants. But again, if a person has COVID, and obviously you're using, you obviously do a number 1 or number 2. If you know you have it, it's likely traces in the sewage. Yes. In terms of treatment how should I say?
Contagion, maybe?
Right, containing the COVID. That's something we're going to have to work with the university. I'm not sure if that's something that I can discuss now or something possible. Again, the agreement or the or where we're trying to go to, or in terms of this new process, is just basically to trace it, to know where it's coming from, what areas have the high volume of COVID, and hopefully be able to trace it beforehand in advance so we can try to go to those neighborhoods, those areas, and have the city obviously respond to those needs and issues.
This is Lucian. I just wanted to let you know that Graham and Louis Kleinman both had their hands up, just so you know.
Okay, so
Louis needs to leave, so I'm looking at his note in the chat.
Who is it, Lucian? Graham is? Graham?
Louis Kleinman, who has to leave shortly, but also Graham Birchall was the first one to reach out.
I still know. Who was the first one to ask the question?
Louis Kleinman.
Okay, so then let's have.
Okay. Just find him really fast. Here he is. I see him. All right, Louis.
Thank you for putting me on. The question is not whether or not the virus can be treated in the wastewater treatment plant. The question is what happens to it when there's an overflow. There are millions of gallons that overflow every year into our rivers and streams. Over 100,000 different kayakers and other human-powered boaters used the water last year. And the question arises is how dangerous is that virus in the overflows, since many of the boathouses, in fact, have their boathouses directly over a combined sewer overflow?
Yes. Thank you for rephrasing, and thank you for the question. So yeah, that goes part of what I was referring to earlier in terms of our operations, our procedures, in terms of when we do have a rainstorm, we do have protocols, whereas when our wastewater treatment plants cannot take in all the rainfall and sewage at this time, we do release. But again, it's only during heavy rainstorm events. And when those events occurs, we do have a protocol where we either chlorinate or we try to maneuver our wastewater treatment procedures equipment to try to address those needs, whether if it's holding more waste in our interceptor pipe, which is the big pipe before the wastewater treatment plant, situations like that. But again, our goal is not to release any wastewater or combined sewer overflow into the waterways. And as I stated before, we have been doing a pretty good job of it. We have analysis of the waterways in our DEP website. In addition to that, if you do see some overflows in the waterways that can also be reported to 311, but we do have DEP staff out there monitoring the situation. And as I said before, we also monitor the waterways, so during and after, and to determine what actions need to be taken, because we are regulated by the state, and we do have to report all those events.
I'm going to let Graham get into this.
Yeah, I want Graham to come in, but Louis, did that answer your question?
No, not really, but I don't have the time to rebut.
Okay, so let's let Graham come.
Hi guys, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Graham Birchall, president of your Downtown Boathouse. We're your friendly boathouse. We're at Pier 26. And just for the record, there is swimming that goes on in New York Harbor. Like Governor's Island has had an annual swim around the harbor for years. You just have to pay money. They're organized swims. They exist. They're not very common. They're not very cheap. But there is swimming, and they are done when the water is clean. And in fact, there's one that for many years left from North Cove that went around Manhattan. It was quite a large prize funding, and it was around Manhattan Cirque. So swimming exists in the harbor. As was mentioned, though, it is not officially like the harbor is not certified for swimming all the time, but you can swim in it. And I confess, I kind of swim in it a lot. So, and quite frankly, today I'd rather swim in the harbor than swim in a swimming pool if I'm worrying about a virus, right? There's just a lot more space in the harbor. There are always viruses in the harbor. Even a drop of ocean water has something like 1 billion viruses in it. And so just one more, this is, as was mentioned by the EDC, this is not a waterborne virus. This is not polio, which would be really like waterborne. It's not cholera, right? It's basically an airborne virus, and it's just one of millions in the environment. So my attitude is if you guys wanted to go swimming, you could go swimming. And why don't you just reach out to me, any community board member who wants to get in the water? I'll figure out a way to make it happen. You have my contact information. No excuses.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks much.
Thank you. That's great.
I think what we were trying to get to, though, is how dangerous is it if COVID is released into
It is
the
the
water?
safest place to be right now, rather than being on the street there, sharing the street with a bunch of other people and an airborne virus. I mean, if I could put you guys on the harbor in kayaks, I'd love to. I can't because I don't have a beach.
Thanks, Graham. Let me get back to Umberto with that.
Thank you.
Agree with that?
Thank you for that. That's actually great to hear, and I'm excited to hear that you're taking advantage of the waterways. Again, I'm just I'm generalizing here, but again, we have a mandate from the state to pretty much remove any pollutants. Basically, we're up to 85 to 95% from our wastewater treatment plants. And we disinfect the wastewater that's part of the treatment process in our wastewater treatment plant. Now, as you know, COVID is obviously a virus, an issue that we're all dealing with now, and there's a lot of questions here, and a lot of questions that I can answer to you by having our either scientists or engineers or other city agencies respond to that. But again, we take pride in the operations and the procedures that we have. The waterways are clean. It is if you decide to swim, that is under your discretion. Again, the state classifies it, but we are doing all we can in terms of treating the wastewater. And in terms of COVID, obviously, as I stated before, we are working with several universities, including NYU, Stanford University, and we're trying to come up with a testing technology here that is best suited for this type of virus. And we want to analyze the data and assess it, and to use that data to help us with these health issues in the future. So again, I have to emphasize these are early stages And then I'm sorry I can't give you the answers that you're looking for right now, but I definitely do not discourage you from using the waterways or the beaches. Obviously, DOH will announce when the beaches can be used and open, but we do have a high standard of protocols in terms of when we release and how we release it and what actions are to be taken to reduce the pollutants in the waterways when these combined sewer overflows occur. Thank you.
The expectation
thank
that
you.
the waterways might actually be open this year, or should we be looking to 2021 before we, can expect the DOH would say they might be open? Like, do you guys have an inclination as to whether or not that time may come this summer?
Right. So let me just answer. So in terms of DEP, we don't notify the public, or it's not within our purview to notify when the waterways are open. As the gentleman said, there's a boathouse, and you can go through in that direction. Our job is just basically to make sure that we monitor the waterways because we have wastewater treatment facilities on the waterways. Number two, in terms of the beach season, from what I'm hearing, yes, they do want to open it. Right now it's just, it's cold, but they are allowing people on the beaches. Again, if there were an issue, Department of Health would issue an advisory to the public, and you would be aware of it, of any of those situations. But just to let you know, I've been in a lot of meetings, even with Parks Department, where obviously funding's an issue, but they do want to open up pools. And again, chlorination is key here, which we do in the wastewater treatment plan, and that's one form or method of treatment. But I hope that answers your question, because again, we don't say whether or not it's okay to swim in the Hudson River. That's not up to us.
I understand. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
So I think we're going to end the conversation here. Although I did see Alice. Did you have your hand up? Alice?
Thanks.
Alice?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah.
Did you have your? I got to just turn off this phone.
I do too.
Is there a question?
Go ahead, Alice.
No, I think I assume you heard me before. I just was identifying this panel tomorrow on this topic, making sure everyone was aware of it, which I shared in the chat, and to just thank you very much for taking this up, Mariam and Pat. We will certainly follow up in the Environmental Protection Committee and jointly look at this on the specifics of the wastewater question and COVID-19. Pretty fascinating stuff. Thanks very much.
Okay, so Umberto, thank you so much for coming to our meeting.
Wait. I have a question.
Sorry,
My hand is up.
Francis. Sorry, Francis.
That's okay. Umberto, is there any impact on our CB1's increased density on, what is the impact on our sewage treatment facility or access, or, because I mean, every now and then we hear water main break over here, pipe broke over here, so, and we are the oldest part of the city, and the density is just constantly increasing with them. As a matter of fact, we had a meeting last night about how they want to build this monstrosity building at 250 Water Street. So what does that mean for the sewage around where I live?
Yes.
Just my thoughts. Question.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yeah, I get that throughout the city as well, but you're right. CB1, the district, the areas is one of the oldest there. One thing I don't want to, talk for too long, but one thing I'll say is that we have a funding plan that we have in a yearly basis and a 10-year capital plan where we always invest in installing new water mains and new sewer mains. But I'll say this, even going back to 100 years ago, our engineers, when they first started building and installing water mains and sewer mains, basically we use the same method. We want to install water mains and sewer mains that will last a century. when we talk about, you hear a lot about aging infrastructure. That is a fact. That is true. The city does get old. However, these pipes, the materials that we use, and the way that we install and operate them, our goal is to make sure that they're operating for a century, for 100 years. We've gone from iron cast water mains to ductile iron mains, which is a little bit more sturdy, bendable, flexible. But to answer your question in terms of numbers, I can tell you that I am the contact person for all water mains throughout New York City. And I can't recall the last notification I sent to Lucian in terms of a water main break. What you do hear a lot about is a lot of leaks, and some of these leaks may be from internal plumbing, or it can be from a hydrant valve or a valve from the city water main. It's not necessarily the pipe itself bursting. Or with all the construction that's taking place, you may have a situation where it affects our water mains. So I hope this answers your question, but that's a very good question. But just to let you know,
that's good to hear too. I mean, it's good to hear.
Yeah. And just one thing to kind of put also what Umberto is saying, the form in which this takes are the DDC projects that come in here. So Worth Street, for example, Chamber Street, these are projects where they are laying in extensions of the new water pipes that are, or Tunnel 3, or is it Tunnel 3, Umberto?
Correct, which is activated, yes.
So a lot of, not all of them, but most of them deal with the renewal of the utilities like electric, gas, steam, and more importantly, water and sewer.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't want to belabor.
Sure.
Belabor the.
So yes, in terms of you. Can you hear? Yeah.
He's breaking up.
Go ahead.
My question. Well, my additional question is, considering, is there? I would imagine there is some sort of evaluation that's done on the ability for the infrastructure to handle those kinds of things before a developer is given approval to build a new high-rise building. Because I'm focusing on 250 Water Street and the fact that they're trying to make that happen, which means that a lot of our pipes and stuff, are going to have to be redone or extended or something. If we get, like, say, 200 more apartments, well, probably more, in the type of high rise that they're looking at building, but there's nothing there. There's nothing there now, but they want to put more stuff in a small area, which is already oversaturated.
Great question, and I was going to answer that. That's something that comes up a lot. And I'll say that there's many levels of oversight when it comes to that. And, whether it's sewer or water, it's always a concern. But, whether it's city planning or in a lower scale, whether it's Department of Buildings receiving these applications for new connections or the units within a building, those things are all overseen by the city, and city agencies do communicate with each other to make sure that they allow what's allowable for within that district. So again, whether it's buildings, DEP, or city planning, we all communicate to make sure that the capacity is not overtaxed. But again, we also rely on the elected officials and you yourselves, community boards, to raise these questions in terms of these skyscrapers, of new development, to make sure that they are following regulations. So yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there aren't questions, can we end it there? If there are any more questions?
I have one quick question. I put my hand up. Sorry. This is Mimi Flint. Yeah, I'm a Skywarn weather spotter, And when we have storms, I tend to monitor some of the reports from the area. And I'm just, this is regarding like the runoff from the streets. There tends to be a bit of flooding pretty quickly when we have thunderstorms come through. Do you know if there's any plans, like, or any plan to fix that? It floods pretty quickly in our area.
I see. So I'll try to be quick, but I failed to mention before that whatever I didn't answer, or if I couldn't answer your questions, please have Lucian forward my email address and email me your questions. I'll be happy to get back to you. I'll have conversations with internal staff. To answer your question, two things. During a heavy rainstorm, you have to allow, I know it's frustrating, especially walking out during a rainstorm, you're trying to cross the street, but please allow the rainfall will take some time in certain areas, certain low-lying areas where you have bowls or poor drainage, whether it's, streets are in need of repair or catch basins are clogged. Or the city sewer system is either in small capacity. But during a rainfall, some areas do take time for it to drain, so you have to allow it some time. But very simply, if there's flooding, street flooding means that the city sewer can't handle the rainfall. You can file a 311 service request, let Lucia know or myself know. Number two, if the catch basin is not draining rainwater, that's a clog. That could easily be serviced by a DEP, by us. But again, yes, you have to allow some time for rainfall. After a couple of days, if you have a bad street where it's still a lot of stagnant water, ponding, that's something that we can take a look at, and it can be filed in 311. Again, it could be a clog in the city sewer or catch basin.
Does that answer it for you, Mimi?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else have their hand up? Nope. Okay, so Roberto, thank you very much. And we will, if we have more questions, we will send them to you. Thank you for coming tonight and sharing this information. And I hope after the testing has started, you said you were working with some universities, after you get some information, we would love to have you come back and share it with us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, Umberto.
You also. Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, so moving along. Taylor, are you there? Taylor and Katie?
Yes. Hi, Pat. Thank you.
Sorry to keep you waiting. I hope you've got your technical difficulties worked out now.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay.
Turning it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much again. I'm going to share my screen with you. Can you guys see the screen okay?
I can. Have that little discussion about using the terminology of white supremacy. So you might want to change that for the presentation to the full board.
To change the term?
I don't think Taylor was on. I think you were having technical difficulties, but yeah, they asked to remove white supremacy.
Okay.
To make a comment on that. I'd like to make a comment on that. This is Mariama. So I'm in support of changing the name if that's what it's been determined to do. But with regard to not only the committee, but globally, and this issue, I think we have to be very careful and walk the line of what the proper terms are as deemed by the government, what words they're using, and the Black community.
Yeah.
We have to be very, very careful about trying to protect the feelings of either the people, who sometimes are guilty of these mentalities, or people who are ignorant and don't understand. And it's a teaching moment. You don't take advantage of a teaching moment by avoiding the topic. If it's white supremacy that's at the root of this issue, then we should be comfortable using the term white supremacy. If it's been determined that that's not what's at the root, then we should, whatever it is, we should be comfortable using it. No different than, let's say, and we're talking LGBTQ issues. IA. Let me add that. And it's not for us to determine what words are appropriate. We need to let them tell us what's okay to say and what's not okay to say. That's how we learn. So I just think, just again, that was a general comment. I'm not objecting to changing it in this instance, but I think, and again, not just for the committee or the neighborhood, but in general for the world, we have to be. This is a moment of honesty and truth coming to bear, and so we have to face it. Sometimes truth is difficult to deal with, but we have to. If we're going to really make real progress, then we have to deal with it. We have to face it, and we have to deal with it. So insisting on phrases like all lives matter, or I don't see your color, or I don't see color, period, and all of these things that the Black community is saying is not acceptable to us. It's not okay. It's not okay to continue to insist upon using it. So that's my only comment. I don't want to hold up Taylor's presentation any longer.
Thank you, Mariama.
Presentation, and then we can discuss. So go ahead, go Taylor.
I agree with Mariama.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you guys for taking the time to listen to us. I hope we don't make too much of fools of ourselves this evening. Quick intros on who we are. My name is Taylor, and my sister's name is Katie. Let's see. Hi. We are two white girls raised in Battery Park City, Lower Manhattan, New York. I'm a millennial. She's from Gen Z. Our parents are Italian and Irish and have been political activists in this community for years. One is actually a member of this board, and the other is a writer for the local newspaper. We would be protesting on the streets right now if not for COVID-19 and our at-risk family members. So we are turning to other forms of activism right now and trying to talk about something that's long overdue. Police violence and structural racism that are so embedded in this city. That intro may feel complete or look complete to many people, but actually it's far from it. It leaves out many people and structures that bring us here today. For example, we've also been raised by another person, one of whom's role goes unnamed by far too many families like mine. Beverly Allen, our other mother, a Jamaican American wife and mother of three, who built her life for her kids in Brooklyn, New York, in part by commuting to this neighborhood to work a job, taking care of my sister and I, our parents, and our grandparents every day since we were born. She's here tonight too, listening into this meeting. This may be the first meeting she's attended, even though she works in this neighborhood and has every right to be at these meetings. Another metaphorical parent of ours and of this neighborhood's is the white power structure that depends on racism to operate. So I wanted to share two stories that took place on the same street in Lower Manhattan. On September 11th, 2001, my sister was 9 months a fetus, and I was 8 years an adult looking out my window in Gateway Plaza onto West Street and the Twin Towers, watching as two planes changed our lives forever. That day, the NYPD and many first responders were our heroes. They ran towards danger and their own in their own deaths to save our lives. Since then, we and other survivors of 9/11 have fought and continue to fight every day against the battle of illness brought on by being in the dust cloud that day. And we've done that fight together. Fast forward to almost 20 years later, on June 2nd, 2020, my sister, now 18 years old, and I, 27, watch history out our windows on West Street yet again. We watched as protests against structural racism, white supremacy, violence on Black lives, especially by the police, pick up after years of Black organizers protesting for the same thing, equality and justice, an end to police violence that has killed a disproportionate number of Black people in this country. We watched as these protests gained momentum and global attention in all 50 states and 18+ countries around the world. At 8 p.m. that night, when New York City's curfew fell, we watched peaceful protests turn violent, except the violence on West Street was being inflicted on civilians by the NYPD. Armed, they charged the crowd, shoved and beat protesters with batons. My NYPD heroes on 9/11/2001 became my villains on June 2nd, 2020. These two stories beg the question, whose lives are our NYPD police protecting? And whose are they hurting to do so? Basically, the answer seems pretty obvious to me. It's something we want to talk about tonight, but it feels like it's white people's lives that are being protected at the expense of Black people's. And this is relevant to this community board because it happened right here in our community. In this example of power structures, and this is an example of power structures at play, and there are so many other examples. So we come to ask this committee to be transparent about this racism and what I guess we have labeled white supremacy, and we're using the label of Black organizers as white supremacy as it plays out in CB1. We ask that we speak up, and we say that we are not okay with police violence against Black Americans here or anywhere. We ask that this committee and this board lead us in making structural changes against white power structures, and that we use our influence to continue this conversation. So my sister and I have been hearing a lot from our white family and friends, phrases like, they're not racist. And I guess our response to that is, to our white family and friends, is that's great, but what we want to know and what Black organizers wants to know are our white family and friends anti-racist? What we mean by anti-racist is, what are we doing as white people who are not racist to combat racism and white power structures? Are we quietly accepting the status quo, or are we speaking up for change? And we ask this community board to examine ourselves as individuals in ongoing ways, and to examine the systems we are moving within in this neighborhood, in this country, in this world. Where are there places we can say, no, this is unfair? Where are there places we can say, stop, let's change how this conversation's going, let's talk about this? Where can we offer something better, something loving, and something just? And we also hear a lot, and we're asking it ourselves, what can we do as white people to make a difference, right? But so many answers have actually been given to us by people of color. They're available in many ways, and this is something that I wanted to consolidate for us. For those of us saying you want to spread love in this time, research is love. Advocacy is love. Having hard conversations is love. You want to spread love? Listen to those in pain who have been systematically oppressed and say, I hear you. I believe in your humanity, and I will fight for it no matter what it takes. That is the most loving we can be. And on that note, I wanted to try and share a clip from a podcast, an NPR podcast called Code Switch. Jamil Smith spoke, and the last minute of the podcast, he's a senior writer for Rolling Stone magazine, and he, they've been talking about the protests, in this episode, and they're talking about what's different and all the historical context leading up to this, and he ends with this message to us.
I will defer judgment on whether or not this is going to be the moment that finally everyone will understand exactly what's happening in the Black communities around this country with regards to policing and over-policing and militarized policing. After Ferguson, it's hard to hold your breath. It's hard to hold your breath when, a 12-year-old kid gets gunned down with a toy gun in the city that you grew up in, as was the case for me with Tamir Rice. And the city kind of shrugs and everyone moves on. Tamir Rice would have been 18 in June. And America moves on. America moves forward. I think to a large extent, white power structure waits for us as Black people, especially, to quiet down, settle down, to get it out of our system in terms of unrest or in terms of online protests. I'll be writing my column, and that moment will happen. But whether or not it will result in any concrete change is really up to people who may be least involved with the trauma. It matters whether or not people who are not affected by this do something.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for listening to that clip. I feel like it directly applies to us here, especially Battery Park City residents in Lower Manhattan, and especially the white residents here. So we also put together some proposals. There's 4 of them, and would love to talk about them more right now. So the first one, we would like to see a resolution put forth that gives condolences for the Black Americans killed by police, that also stands on the record supporting Black Lives Matter, and states its support for the police reforms put forth by the city, the state, and the federal government, those that have already passed and those that have not yet passed. And then another one, we would like to request the immediate release of protesters and nonviolent arrests from jails and detention centers in our CB1 community. I think I can think of at least 3 jails. And then that we ask Precinct 1 to welcome protesters here in CB1, and that we say that we won't accept any more police violence against these protesters, like we saw on June 2nd, and all throughout the protesting in Lower Manhattan. We've seen violence done by the police on the protesters. and request that there be no more arrests of these protesters just for protesting. The third proposal, so this one is our way of, our idea for continuing this conversation, to structurally change, this community board slightly by providing a space, whether it be a working group or a whole committee, where we just talk about racial injustice, we talk about LGBTQ issues, we talk about gender, class. It could be a space to continue this long overdue conversation. And then also a place where this committee can continue to talk about the reforms that we are seeing passed in our state and our city. I'm really glad that they've passed. It's thanks to all the organizers and our elected officials. But how do we know how those are going to play out? Are they going to be done effectively? Are they enough? Where can we work on them? And I would love a space where this community can continue talking about that and continue proposing changes to make those effective. And I know that Precinct 1 can have meetings with this committee specifically, but I would love to have a space where we can really have the hard conversations with our officers and with our detention centers, and be vocal about how we can see those spaces be safer. And a town hall, it could be a place where we can host town halls with experts. I think we're in due for one very soon. And the fourth one is a request that we provide a space for a memorial in Battery Park City with names of unarmed Black Americans killed by the police. There are many memorials in this country and many in Battery Park City specifically, but none that mourn for unarmed Black Americans murdered by the police that I know of. Battery Park City houses the police memorial right now. It also houses, has new memorials coming in for Hurricane Maria and Mother Cabrini, two hurricanes that are two memorials that aren't specifically, based in or related to this neighborhood, and yet we house them. So these are some of our proposals, and thank you to this committee so much for taking the time to listen to us. Sorry for my nerves. We really appreciate everything you've done and would love to continue talking about this.
First of all, I have to tell you that I give you applause. You did a fantastic job. Don't be nervous. It was a great presentation from both of you.
Thank
and
you.
I think the committee will agree you did a fabulous job. So I'm going to open it up now for either discussion, questions, proposals. So who wants to go first? Hands up. Why don't we put our hands up?
Actually, Pat?
I can't hear.
Yeah, I believe Mitch, I don't see any hands up on the board, but Mitch said I think he has something to say.
I'm happy to recognize Mitch if I can do that.
I basically agree with everything the two young ladies said, like 99.9%, and every one of their suggestions I would support. I would just maybe put a little asterisk. I forget, there was one of the things about I agree with no arrests for the protesters and peaceful protesters. Maybe just putting a little, because unfortunately there were people on the extreme right and the extreme left that were trying to hijack this righteous movement, and so some of the looters didn't have the best of intentions and were trying to upset the righteous protests. So maybe somehow put something to separate that from my support or our support of not arresting peaceful protesters, which I think is, I don't know how it could be worded, or I don't know how you feel, but there were unfortunately a few people that,
I think that's an important clarification. I would just add to this point, as a point of clarification, further point of clarification, that Cy Vance, the district attorney, has pledged to not prosecute, although there's been a number of arrests, he has pledged to not prosecute any protesters. But I support going forward with the resolution as well.
I support not prosecuting any protester. I'm just separating the term looter from protester.
No, I understand, Mitch. I was saying I think that that's a valuable and important clarification that you made. You know, a distinction. Yeah,
And
I agree with you.
I like. Well, yeah. Okay.
Protesters, and she didn't say looters. So I think that the point is you might want to put peaceful protesters in front of it.
That's fine. Then I agree with 100% of that.
Thank you. That was a good clarification point in the writing.
And I also learned the difference between generations Z and millennials, which I wasn't sure of before today.
Okay, good. Any other points, discussion, questions? Okay.
Hey, Pat?
Oh,
today is
yes. Oh.
an educational part of.
Can I pop in and say something?
I see a lot of hands up too.
Yeah.
Tammy?
Let the hands go up. Yeah. Hands go up from your committee. I'll wait to the end.
Tammy?
I see your hand too, Tammy.
It's fine. You can go up. You go, Tammy. All right. Tammy says she'll wait to the end. Let me see. Fern, I see your hand is up.
Francis?
I think Francis's hand is up. Bob Schneck.
Francis, not Fern. Pat?
I'm sorry. I see Francis. Go ahead, Francis.
Okay. Very good presentation, Taylor. Thank you for helping us begin the conversation. I think that the conversation is a lot bigger than we know, or extends back a long period to many, many years ago. What some of the programs that I listen to on how Black people deal with white aggression and race relations and the things that have been happening is the fact that American history is built on a lie. And we need to go back and learn American history. And once we learn American history, then we can understand better why we are where we are. Because it's from the very beginning, there's been a systematic progression of white supremacy taking control over all non-whites. And it started with the Native Americans, and then they imported slaves, and it continued. And what happened was they took real American history and civics out of the education process. And as I know it as, it's the dumbing down of America. And there's a lot of us, I mean, Black people as well, who are ignorant of the real American history. And if we begin to look at the real American history and where we come from and how this country was built, then we will have a better understanding of where we're at now. The other side of that is in terms of policing over a period of time. And in that whole scenario, policing has been used as a force to control whoever, you know, and so here we are, and the police have been given the right of way for many, many years, and the establishment has looked the other way, and we are where we are. So I think that education, starting from the roots of American history, would be a very good thing. I also think that in terms of the plaque, I think that's an excellent idea. I think you might want to consider maybe just narrowing the focus to New York City, Black people who have been killed, and look at like Abner Louima, Eric Gardner, you know, Sean Bell. I think you get more run mileage out of that than, I'm not going to mention them all, but you get my point. My point is to keep it local, and I'm sure you might get a better response. Not to say that I think all the names should be listed, but that's happening in other parts of New York City. And then coordinating with the first precinct would be a good idea in terms of the protesting issues that you want to, you know, and that you want to have happen in this area. I think that if you reached out to them and said, look, you know, or we have this idea, you know, in terms of the protesters down here, this and that and the other, whatever. So I think you guys are great for starting the conversation, and you have a lot of wonderful ideas, and I'm happy that you will keep hope alive and that something will happen in terms of the beginnings of talking about race relations in the United States. In Community Board 1, the United States, and it is just not here. It's all over the world, you know. So I think that's something to be looked at. And your parents, thank you. I thank your parents as well.
Yes, and thank you so much. I just want to chime in and say thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak and being patient with us. And as we speak, I want to say, though, we're definitely not starting the conversation. We're trying to continue it. It's definitely been started by many organizers, but thank you. I'm glad to bring it here, and I would love to continue the conversation. Thank you.
Okay. Another thing I want to say, Taylor, is so all the community boards in Manhattan are interested in having this conversation. And so there may be a way that we could organize. I mean, maybe we should go to the borough president and see if we can organize a Manhattan. I mean, it's happening all over the city, but, you know, one step at a time. But maybe there's a way we can organize a meeting with the Manhattan community boards and any, you know, and the public to continue the conversation. All right, who else has their hand up? Nope. Yes. Nope. Nope. Justine?
I have my hand up, but I said I was happy to, you know, be last of the hands. If nobody else has theirs, I'll go.
Can I add something to what Francis said, Pat?
Go, Mitch.
Okay, I was just doing some research while she was talking, and I mean, I couldn't agree more. But even though it's in Brooklyn, but not in Manhattan, the last fort in the city, Fort Hamilton, the government denied the city council or some people a year or two ago. There's Stonewall Jackson Drive and General Lee Street in Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn, and the government refused to change the names as recently as 1 or 2 years ago. So even though it's not, since we're talking about world issues, not just Community Board 1 issues, I think that's something that if we can add to the docket, that would be directly related to what these two young ladies were talking about and what we're talking about.
And I think we should reach out to the community board that those streets are located in and have a conversation with them.
All right, so just so that you know, the Fort Hamilton military base in Brooklyn, and there's 2 streets, Stonewall Jackson Drive and General Lee Street.
All right, so you can shoot an email about that, okay?
Okay. I just Googled it. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Justine, you had your hand up?
I do. I just want to thank both Katie and Taylor for the great presentation and the hard work that went into doing this. I also want to recognize their cousin Claire, who was behind the scenes and a lot of the stuff that they've been doing. I think she's on the attendee list. She's done a lot of research with them. Sorry?
Those who don't know, our parent of these two lovely ladies.
Yeah, clearly. Sorry for those who don't know, these are my daughters. But I also want to second or echo what Mitch said. I like the idea of going through and getting rid of the names of Confederate, I don't know what the hell they are, soldiers, whoever. It's not.
Justine, enemy combatants. That's what they were, enemy combatants.
There you go, enemy combatants. I like it. So I support that suggestion. I support almost all the resolution ideas that the girls put forth. I don't know if this committee could pick that up and take it with them as that, with those lists as a framework for a resolution or a bunch of resolutions coming out of this committee, or how that works. But if that's the case, I support those as a framework. And I guess I just want to say too that the conversation, it's personal to us here in Battery Park City because that's where we live and that's where my girls grew up. And that's what they're talking about, but it is every place in the world. So I love your suggestion. I think it was you, Pat, about making this to the other community boards and bringing it larger, because the conversation has to start. And the Gen Zs and the millennials need to step up and take over the reins. And a lot of them are doing it and a lot of them aren't. And I just love the fact that they're coming forward, and I want to see their friends and their colleagues and their classmates and their whatever getting more involved, because it's not going to change unless everybody gets involved. And that means voting too. I'm done. Thank you.
Who else has their hand up? Mimi? Mimi?
Hey, Mimi again. I agree with everything. I think that to speak to what was saying about the streets in Brooklyn, I think that it would be good for us to just look at all of our monuments. I know that it's not in our district, it is in Manhattan though. There is the obelisk to General Worth, who is a hero of genocide, the Indian Wars. I think that we need to, just look at our monuments and question them and look into that. So the thing about General Worth's obelisk is that I think he's buried underneath it, but that's also not in our district. But we should definitely look at what is in our district.
Thank you. And Mimi,
we do have Worth Street.
If I can, Lucian, if I could just add for Mimi, I just want people to. I'm not advocating tearing these things down, but they shouldn't be glorified. I'm advocating having them in a museum, just like when I like you go to the Holocaust Museum and you see these terrible atrocities on display so that you don't forget, or the Peace Museum in Japan, and you see these melted bicycles and little kids So I'm not advocating having them disappear, but not being glorified. They should be removed to a museum or something like that.
Yeah, I agree. I also, Worth Street is another one. And by the way, I'm from Fort Worth, which is named after him as well, which is interesting. Tidbit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi. Okay, so Tammy and Mariama, who wants to go? Who wants to speak?
I got it. So the only thing I want to add, I wanted to say thank you very specifically to the girls for coming and speaking. It's hard, it's scary, but you will get better at it. I will tell you, the more you practice. So I'm delighted. If we were your first, I hope we are not your last, right? Please come back. There are other things to really think about, because your thinking is amazing, but we have such a cultural history in Lower Manhattan that we can actually be a part of a future dialogue. The African burial grounds in Lower Manhattan show from the very beginning stages of what happened to the African experience in New York City and in America. We can capitalize on that because there are still places that are unbuilt from it, and not a plaque, but a plaque is a nice place to stop. That's one of the things that drives us all crazy about the number of memorials in Battery Park City. Something interactive, something that celebrates the success of where we are, the goals for the future, and recognizes the past would be really comprehensive, and something I am sure that you guys can help figure out and be a part of that solution. And while you think of Battery Park City, because that's where you're more located, I think it should be at City Hall, right? I think it should be in the biggest place with the most amount of tourists to have the biggest impact and to really have a say that says, this is not who we are as a nation going forward, right? We've got the African burial grounds. There are places around all over Tribeca that represent the experience and the life. And that we need to capitalize on and really make something that is dynamic. I agree with locking away all the crappy people into a museum behind glass in terms of like memorials and statues, but finding ways to celebrate the positive impacts as well, to show a really good dialogue would be amazing. So that's more food for thought. Think outside your neighborhood, because we've got lots of really great things east and west to take a look at. Make sure that when you're thinking and proposing, you do it someplace that you feel will have not only the greatest impact for the people themselves, but that more people will see it. Right? And thank you again. It's very scary the first time. When we get in person, it'll be easier versus virtual. I promise. I promise. And I cannot wait to see you at the next meeting. So thank you.
Someone needs to mute their microphone. They're having a conversation in the background. Mariama?
Yes, so I'm just going to double back. First of all, thank you so much, Taylor, Katie, Claire, for your presentation. I want to congratulate you. Clearly, it was important to this committee and to the board that you have an opportunity to speak, but I just want you to know how important it was to me as an individual that we hear not only from you specifically, although that was super important to me, but that we hear from young people. I think we have to face facts. Again, we have to, this is a time where we have to capture the moment. This is a moment of truth. You know, some of you may be into astrology, approaching the age of Aquarius. The sign of Aquarius is all about freedom and humanitarianism. And so, you know, there's a saying, as above, so below. It's going on above us in the celestial system. It's happening here, where we're moving into this age of freedom and humanitarianism, despite whether, you know, you don't want to come, you'll get left behind, basically. So it's really important, but even to narrow it down to this neighborhood specifically, I think we have to face fact. We have people, colleagues, friends, family members who unfortunately are passing away from, you know, this is a 9/11 affected community, and we're losing a lot of our historians on a personal level, right? The people who knew these stories and who had this information. And that means that we have no choice but to hand the baton to the millennials, to Gen Z. This is going to be your community, your world. So who better to hear from than you specifically? So I thank you, you know, from the bottom of my heart, I congratulate you for your bravery in doing this, you know, and for your sensitivity and compassion in even recognizing that there was a problem, because some people could have seen the exact same thing that you saw and not been moved. So to get more specific into some of the things that you were talking about, first of all, the white supremacy, and I see Claire's made a comment about it that I was going to make. So Francis touched on the history of this country, right? Officers, and I have respect for officers. Actually, some of you may know that I actually come from a military family, down to having been an Army wife for over a decade. My children were largely raised without their father because we sacrificed for the country, okay? So I have nothing against officers. I want to be very clear about that. But the term officers comes from overseers on the plantations. So this is from where not only the mindset, but the systemic roots come and from where they've grown. And so if we're going to be honest about what's happening, we have to go back to where it started. That's where and how it started. And so why did racism begin? Because of a supremacist mentality, whether we like the sound of that word or not. The United States Constitution was written to state that some people were people and some people were not human at all. That's not been removed. It's just been amended. to make a correction, but you can still read the Constitution. It is there. 3/4 of a person, not a whole human being. And so this is what we have to deal with. We may not like it. The truth can be ugly. It can be painful. It can be a turnoff, depending upon, everybody has a right to their own perspective. But one thing that it is going to be for us all is the truth is the truth. Like, it is. My mother used to say that the truth doesn't care who anyone who tells it. So that said, there are avenues that we can look into maybe from our community, but I've seen some things in the larger community. For example, Yale is offering a free class. I don't know if it's already begun, if it's too late to get into, but with American history and specific to, as it relates to African Americans from the Emancipation Proclamation to present. This is something that people can become educated. I think even Black people should do it. I should do it, and I don't consider myself a dummy, especially with regard to this topic. But I can learn something. We can, always learn something. So it's available. But maybe there's some sort of education that we can provide out of the neighborhood, and I think that speaks to some of the proposal that you were making. Yeah, I had clarified earlier that with regard to the arrests and everything, arrests have been made, to my knowledge as well. But I did see the New York State District Attorney, Cy Vance, say that he was not going to prosecute any protesters. He refused to prosecute any protesters. So we applaud him for that. The governor also in support of that, which made me very happy. But then to segue over to your discussion about the monument and wanting to make a memorial, to Mitch's point, I too had thought about maybe some sort of, monuments, maybe a combination of what you guys both had in mind. I'm thinking things like, like I am Wall Street. I served as the first slave auction. I am the South Street Seaport. I received, the people. I think that we should have some sort of plaque or some educational information at all of these places. This whole area is not just that little cube of the African burial ground, but this whole area is to where Black people were relegated and where we lived, until it was decided we couldn't anymore. Here and what's now Central Park, which was then Seneca Valley, what some people don't know either. It was all erased so that we could have what we have today, a park. Yeah. So Black people were murdered to create that park and displaced, evicted to make that park. And so I think, extending out of our neighborhood up there, every entrance of Central Park should say, people used to live here, and give the history of that, because New Yorkers don't even know.
And something about the Underground Railroad too, Mariama.
I'm sorry?
And something about the Underground Railroad, like the movement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's still homes that you can visit, particularly in Brooklyn, that were along the railroad that have been, monuments, made into monuments that you can go and check out and find out what's going on. But yeah, with regard to the Confederate memorabilia and statues and things that you were talking about, I meant to make a point. So the governor supports maintaining Christopher Columbus.
Right.
A lot can be said about that either way. I personally think there are a number of great Italian Americans, and he wasn't one of them. That's right. My personal opinion. So I'm not sure why there's a need to hold on to that, but to reject others. But that's something that is going on.
And Mariama, I actually agree with you about that. But just to play devil's advocate, I could see how that could be like a contentious point. But when you're talking about the Confederacy, that's just like an enemy combatant.
I agree. That's what I was saying. I come from a military family. Every man in my family has fought somewhere or served in some sort of capacity, with the exception of my son. We stopped it there. Right. After what his father went through, we didn't allow my son to serve. I'll put it that way. But these people were traitors. So this is another problem. People don't even know the history of the Civil War. These people, like you said, were enemy combatants, insurrectionists. These were traitors. These were the losers of the war. They're treasonous. And what happened was they were given like a pardon after the Civil War to say, okay, we won't like further prosecute you, but that by no means should they have been celebrated. I mean, it's outrageous.
And you know, Mariana, concerning the flag stuff, after World War II, Germany didn't just say, okay, it's part of our history. They banned the Nazi flag, which was the enemy combatant, and it should be this. It should be this, in my opinion.
It's the only country in the world where we celebrate the losers. We celebrate the people who, you know, who can't. Many of us have, you know, ancestors not that far back. We're talking about the Civil War, 1800s, that were Union fighters. What are you saying to them? It's a slap in the face. Right. So anyway, I'm sorry, is Pat saying something?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to tell people, because many people don't know that a lot of those Civil War memorials were put up like in the 20s and the 30s. Not
right. It wasn't
right
after the right.
Yes.
It had to do with the Jim Crow South because of the they were afraid of losing, like the KKK was afraid of losing power, so it didn't happen until like after the 20th century.
Right.
Which makes it even more like disgusting.
All right, but Mitch, I'm going to say something. Let's not just say the Jim Crow South. There was also Jim Crow in the North. It was just under a different.
You're right. So we'll leave it at Jim Crow.
Yes. So basically there was 400, actually 2019 was the 400th anniversary of slavery. So at this point, we are at 463 years, I believe it is, if you include, you know, slavery and then the post-slavery Jim Crow era. 463, don't quote me on the number, but I'm pretty sure that's it. Years of basically suffering and perpetuating this these mentalities, and that's how you end up with something that is systemic. You know, it's not born overnight. It wasn't born overnight here. It was bred, and so again, in order to remove it, we have to visit our past. Like you said, Germany did. You know, they totally faced you know, their basically domestic terrorist history, you know, and they denounced it, right. You know, and they don't at all celebrate it. And they don't give any of their citizens permission to celebrate it. Right. You will go to jail in Germany if you attempt to, right. You know, celebrate Hitler or these things. You just cannot do it there. And we shouldn't. This is the only country where we celebrate our enemies. Yes. I'm sorry.
So, I hate to, but why don't you, can Bob ask his question, and if you have something else, we can come back to you?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead. I have to remember what I wanted to say about the proposals that they wanted to make. Sorry,
I'll give you a minute to think.
Write it down.
Go ahead.
Okay, so what I wanted to say is what happened is that while I've been kind of in the middle of all this experience, I wrote a poem, which is also a prayer, which I shared in the chat. And I think that for me, this is obviously, I'm amazingly, from my point of view, I'm over 70 and I've lived a whole lifetime now. And this, I think, is a chance for this country and all of us to really make some very big changes. And I actually can feel in a very real way that things are possible that haven't been possible in my lifetime before. And I have been in hundreds of demonstrations and kind of throwing my life at trying to make peace for many, many years. But and for all of that, it never felt hopeful as it does now. So I really think that that what I would like to offer here is that all of us should really come together in some way that allows us to move our whole culture and our whole world for the best, and to open everyone's heart in this and to find some kind of purpose that humanizes everyone. And so I think when I was a kid, I was a teacher of the humanities, and the question always is how to be a human being. And so our opportunity is to ask and answer the question, how to be a human being, and for all of us to be the best human beings we can possibly be. So that's my comment. And I want to thank Katie and Taylor for the presentation, because I was really touched by the effort. So thank you so much.
Great. Mimi, did you have your hand up, or was that from earlier?
Sorry, I'll.
Sarah wants to talk though.
Hand up, or is that
I
from
just
earlier?
I just took it down. Sorry about that. I forgot to hit the hand again.
Sarah wanted to say something?
Yeah, just very quickly. I think the girls did a great job. It was very interesting, very well presented. Thank you, Taylor and Katie. What was said about education and the lack of civics instruction and the lack of history being taught realistically, those are things that need to be more widely spread. Do we go to the Youth and Education Committee? Do we go to the mayor? Do we go to the Department of Education? How can we pressure, can we, as a group or as concerned citizens, bring pressure to bear on how our students are educated? I know that a lot of my family history is very different from what my child learned in school. And it was from us that he learned about immigration. I mean, he learned what there was in school, but he learned about it from us. So I feel very strongly that Mariama's point, I think it was Mariama who said that the education in this country is sorely lacking. I would feel very, very good about maybe having the girls make a similar presentation to Youth and Ed, or indeed to the Education Department. But I think that really is the key to change education, along with jobs and your basic, care for other people. However, those things don't happen a lot. So education is something that does evolve and that perhaps we can impact.
And that should be brought up to the state also, Sarah, because unfortunately, that's like, I think the New York State education, that's under one umbrella.
I know, my dad was in the state education department for 20 years, so fighting in the 70s.
Yeah, so I agree with what you said, though.
All right, so I don't see any more hands up. Anyone else wanted to ask a question or make a statement?
Can I say
If
something?
not, who is talking?
Katie.
Hi, Katie.
Hi.
Great presentation.
Thank you. I was just gonna say thank you everyone for listening and coming, and thank you to all the people on CB1 for letting us present and coming today. And there are a few people who came just for this presentation, Gen Z, millennials, their parents. So thank you to all of them. And thank you to Taylor, Claire, Greg, to Justine Cuccia, Matthew Fenton, all for helping support and put this presentation together. And thank you to Pat and Mariama too for supporting us. Thank you so much.
Wonderful presentation. Some of your friends who have come, and is there anyone that would like to say anything?
I know this is Taylor. Claire's comment in conversation with Mariama's comment in conversation with I guess what I missed about whether or not to include white supremacy, I think is really well put. Is it possible for her to say that, or?
I'm trying to find Claire. Where's Claire's comment? Well, let's let Claire make her comment. Can we get Claire on the line? Can we get Claire?
Yeah. Claire Craig, is that the name?
That's Claire Craig.
You're on the line.
Hello? We can hear you. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I think the comment kind of covers the point. I just kind of wanted to respond because I saw in the chat that there was concern about the word white supremacy and what it means. And I know that for most people, what comes to mind when you hear the word white supremacy is like the KKK and like more violent individuals, but also that it is a person who genuinely believes that white people are superior. And I just want to echo what Black activists have been saying. And also, I noticed that there were some other people who were commenting as well, like Mariama and Pat mentioned in the comments too, and in their with their voices too, that it is referring not solely to violent individuals and a personal philosophy, but to a structural issue that goes to the foundation of the country. I don't want to sort of repeat what's been said, but yeah, that was just there.
Why don't you read your comment, Claire?
Sure. Okay. So, let me see. Where was I? Right. Right. So the history of the U.S. was built on a culture of white supremacy, as Mariama mentioned. It was, well, not mentioned, explained, that it was built by white slave owners who wrote into the law that white people were superior. And let's also not forget that these white slave owners writing these laws and creating the country were creating a structure on a land that was stolen through genocide. So it's a twofold form of white supremacy. So although we might want to think that this history is over, the foundations of our laws, society, and economics are formed on white supremacist ideology. I think that an example that is particularly relevant to our neighborhood is, that one can trace is the existing economic and housing disparities when it comes to race. And some examples of that are, for one, the fact that we have never paid reparations to descendants of people who are victimized by slavery in the U.S. Redlining is a practice that is still, unfortunately, it's not as explicit now, but it's still in practice, and that is one that affects housing security, quality of life, and access to education and social climbing. And I think that's.
Thank you, Claire.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
No problem.
You want to add something else?
Could you define redlining, please, for?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So redlining is the practice in which, so it's actually, I think, going with a more visual explanation helps because I think it was done visually. So they would take a map of the city and literally draw a red line around certain neighborhoods or down a street, and say on this side of the red line in the red area, this is where the Black population will live, and on this side of the red line, they will not live. And so it refers to the ghettoization of American cities.
And they took it further in terms of loans. Banks were given those maps to follow, and you would know to whom, to say yes and to whom to say no when it came to a loan application.
Banks were not allowed then to sell property to anyone who lived or give loans to anyone who lived in the area that was actually outlined in red. And also, to take it further, so when there were white areas where people lived and bought homes, even if they wanted to sell their home to a Black person, they were not allowed to sell their home to a Black person. And that's how they kept a particular area. Yes, Mitch.
Pat, I just want Claire also to know, because this is, probably might not know this from that age. When they built the Cross Bronx Expressway, the Cross Bronx Expressway had a similar effect in an analogous situation to redlining, where it kind of split the Bronx into the haves and have-nots, and that was Robert Moses, but that was the effect of the Cross Bronx Expressway many years ago.
And hi, this is
So-
Lucian. I'll just add only that redlining also is believed to continue to exist in the form of exclusionary zoning, which is present in New York City and in other surrounding.
Did everybody hear Lucian's comment?
No.
Not quite. He kind of faded out.
Yeah, sorry. So redlining also is believed to still exist in the form of exclusionary zoning that exists not only in New York City, but its surrounding towns and across the United States. So it's still an actively used measure for one population to keep out another.
There's also a way to keep black. You couldn't have black ownership, and you hear this a lot now in conversation. Where one way to build family wealth and generational wealth is by owning a home. You know, because you can then, if you need to, you can either sell the home or you can live there. And once the home is paid for, you don't have to pay rent. So it encompasses a lot of different areas of how it affected Black people. All right. Does anyone else have a comment or a question?
Tricia has a comment.
If everybody's done, I'll just finish mine, or no? If somebody else has to comment, that's fine. I'll wait.
Tricia has her hand up.
One. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Hello? You can hear me?
I hear you, Tricia.
Yeah, we hear you.
Good. I first want to say thank you also to Taylor and Katie and Claire. What an amazing presentation. It took a lot. I have so much respect for you. I'm really excited to that you'll be working on this. I hope to get my girls involved too. They're in finals, so they're heads down right now. I wanted just to jump quickly, and I had nothing left to add, all the great comments on that, but I wanted to address something someone said about youth and ed and addressing the history part of how we teach our kids about American history. We actually have an item that's coming that I'm adding to our agenda for July, and I'm going to read it to you really quickly. It's calling upon the Department of Education to create a teacher-led committee to thoroughly, inclusively, and transparently review its curriculum expectations, especially in social studies and English language arts, to reflect the diversity of the student body. From review, provide recommendations to implement a more honest and truthful retelling of our history and include literature beyond the Western canon. And we're going to be exploring that topic and developing a resolution. We are going to be working in conjunction with other community boards so it has more impact. So I wanted just to let you know that for all that would be interested in attending for that conversation.
Fantastic. And Tricia, you might want to have a conversation also. New York happens to be one of the most, in terms of education and schools, very segregated. You have areas where you have mostly all Black students, and you have other areas where you have mostly white students. And the schools are not equal. The schools do not have the same facilities. They don't have the access to equipment. You might want to include that in your discussion.
It's already, that's been years in the making, Pat, and we also already have a task force. The CEC is taking on that issue, and they have a diversity task force that's been working on this for the last couple of years. And I just attended, I mean, this is a quality of life meeting, but for all those interested in that report, I just attended that meeting, and the results of their resolutions I'm going to be announcing about some of the things that they're advocating for.
Thank you. Okay, so if there aren't any other hands, Mariama, you finish your comment, and then I think we should talk about how we want to go forward.
Okay.
Mariama?
Yeah. So first to Sarah and Tricia's comments and points. First of all, they're very well taken by me personally. I did want to mention, so I have 3 children that I raised here in CB1. I was a longtime member of Tricia's committee, Youth and Education. I joined back when Paul Hovitz and Rebecca, who was an educator, Department of State Ed, were the chairs. So I've joined as a public member. So it's a committee that's very dear to me, that I only left recently because we were trying to focus on having only 2 committees each as board members. And when I was invited and asked to become the co-chair of Quality of Life, I let go of Youth and Ed, but it's still very dear to me. So two of my children went to 234 and the other went to 89. But at 234 in the fifth grade, I don't know if they still do this, but in the fifth grade at the time, they had this project every year where you had to basically tell your family's immigration story. My now 24-year-old experienced it, and my now 18-year-old experienced it. And it would make me very angry every time it would come up, because I would say we're a Black family, okay? I don't have an immigration story. My kids don't have an immigration story. My mother's half Cherokee. So we are Native and African American. We don't have an immigration story. Like part of our family was brought here and part was already here. But that was them attempting to be sensitive to other cultures, right? They're trying to teach the kids something about other cultures and how we all arrived here in this melting pot. But even in doing something like that, right, it was so, coming from a really positive place, I'm sure it was exclusionary, right? Because it's exclusionary to people who are Native or the descendant of slaves. We didn't migrate here. We didn't choose, I want to get to America and come across Ellis Island. That's not how it worked. And I think that is something that's often forgotten as well. So it's very important to me that we correct some of the curricula. And just because we should just be teaching our children the right thing, right? Like a correct history. Why do we want to teach them falsehoods? It doesn't make any sense.
Mariana, I want to ask you a question, because I actually like I agree with. Couldn't that have been like, since they were basing it on the majority of people immigration stories, so when it came time for your family, couldn't that have been a great time to have your story told, to educate the others?
I would always make my children do something that was based in our heritage, but that wasn't the assignment, you know? And when my kids would respond, because I'd say, well, tell your teacher that we didn't migrate here, you know? And then
did the teachers respond positively to that?
No, I had to get angry every time.
I'm sure it's not happening.
Then that's the problem right there, not the assignment. Yeah.
I'm told that Amy K from the attendee section has a comment.
Okay, she can go. What I wanted to get to finally was my input on the resolutions. But I guess we can just start the conversation about the resolutions after everybody else is done, and I'll jump back in then.
Okay, Betty? Did you say Betty?
No, Amy K.
Sorry,
Amy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. Sorry, and I'm very apologetic to Taylor and Katie Jo and Claire for missing their presentation. I really, really tried, but these meetings, they never go on agenda. When I hop in late, I was actually late. But I want to say to Mariana's point, thank you. Thank you for the education comment, please. I'm sitting here listening to Tricia, which I appreciate all the work she does, and the fact that the girls, the young women brought this up, because I'm a firm advocate for civics and history being taught, and it has to be adapted and it has to be taught within the context of where we are now. But too much, in my opinion, of the public school education is based on social justice, but they don't give the students context. So the over political correctness, and excuse the term, and I don't mean to offend, that I think happened, essentially erased the history of America that students need to know. You have to know how everyone in your class got here, and some of it's ugly, but you need to learn that to be a strong American who can raise their hand and fight injustice the right way with the right information. And by not educating our students, I think it's a great disservice. So I love the fact that, Mariana, everything you were saying, stick to history, stick to the facts, and give the students the tools to learn from. Don't skip it because it's uncomfortable. To be an American is to be uncomfortable, in my opinion. And now more than ever, you need to give these kids the information so that they can say, I had no idea that that's how my Black classmates, some of them, got here. And I didn't know about the islands and the culture and the slavery that happened in other places where people came from. And I did not know about the Civil War, which is absolutely appalling to me as an American citizen, that my kids were not taught about the Civil War. But I come from the generation, I'm 55, I wasn't taught about Vietnam. That history was way too recent. And World War II wasn't even gone into in that degree. But we can't repeat that with these kids. And that's all. So please, God love you for doing anything to correct the education, because I think when we educate our young people, we move even further.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you. So, Mariama, did you, before we start the discussion on how we're going to move forward, did you have one more point you wanted to make?
Well, yes, I really want to cheer on the young ladies. I almost called them girls and not girls, they're grown. For visiting also the topic of intersectionality, because this is one that is overlooked as well. And when it's not overlooked, people try to lump it together. So let me just say that to be LGBTQIA is not necessarily to be Black, and it is not the same experience. However, we do have, of course, Black people who are also LGBTQIA. And so not everyone has to know your sexuality or your gender when they meet you. People do tend to know, unless you're able to, what we call pass, right? I'm putting air quotes, you can't see. What we do tend to know is what race you are, right? Or what color, what race you appear to be at least, right? If you're brown. And so when we're having these situations where gender or sexuality are also coming into play, we have people who are being victimized multiple times, over and over and over again, for the different boxes into which they fit. And I think that this is something that has not been visited, not only in this community, but in general, in the city. I don't remember having a conversation similar to this, but I do remember having instances in this community, things that came up for vote. I'll give you one example. There was about a year or two ago, some transgender people beaten up in a restaurant in Tribeca. The owner of that restaurant applied for a liquor license at some other location. I brought it up at the meeting that this is who these people were, essentially. And, there, of course, there was some feedback from people who were like, oh, great, to bring that up. And there were some that are like, it doesn't impress upon the application. To this day, I don't really see how it didn't impress upon the application. I think it goes definitely to character and what kind of places we, who we feel we can trust with a license and who we can't. But there's been issues, basically, is what I wanted to get to, where LGBTQ issues have come up, and I'm a straight woman, but I've addressed them to the extent that I'm able. But I think that we need to do more, So I'm happy that that's been brought to the table, and I'd love to be involved in any of, the different things that you talked about, if you would have me, especially moving on with that sort of topic and the larger issues and educating people as to what's really going on. That's it.
All right, so it's 8:17, and I think we should spend the next 15 minutes talking about how we would like to go forward. Do we want to write a reso? Do we want to hold on the reso because things are changing by the minute? And do we want to approach the borough board so that we could and approach our borough president and see if we could organize a town hall get-together or a convention of some sort for Manhattan, where we can talk and possibly put forth a resolution that comes from our entire borough and all of the community boards involved. So someone give me some.
Pat, how about the points that the two young women are like those 4 points? How about if we just if everybody agrees that we just support that, like the points that they wrote down?
I would second what Mitch said. I think we need to do something, and if everything you said, yes, but I don't think we should let a minute go by without having this board speak. So we need to speak from this committee to bring it to the full board, and especially the less controversial parts. And what I'm looking at as controversial might be the memorial in Battery Park City. But other than that, I agree with everything that they said.
Yeah.
And about the memorial, I just don't want duplication.
You know,
That's
just add the word peaceful before the word protesters, and then I think everything clicks in every box that they brought up.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I would say I agree with you. And even then, I like the idea of a memorial. I just would hold off on where we say the place is.
I feel like peaceful is implied with protesters. I don't know that we actually need to.
Peaceful. I kind of agree with Mitch, because people are going to push back and say, well, the looters, da, da, da. It's like, no. We have to, I think nothing can be.
Those are looters. There's people that are looters, and then there's people that are protesters.
Why would the word peaceful be controversial? I mean,
I'm not saying it's controversial.
Well, you might have, but it does bring up a question potentially, because people look for loopholes all the time. You know, like what does peaceful mean? Maybe it has different meanings to different people, similar to like affordable housing, affordable to whom, you know, peaceful by whose standards? I don't know.
Because, I mean, as long as there's not, how about nonviolent? Forget peaceful. I don't know.
Maybe nonviolent protesters is a better way to go.
That's fine, Mariana. No problem. I'm cool with all of that. Just, you know, so that we just separate the two groups.
Could I make a comment? I'm sorry, I don't know if it's out of turn for me to speak.
No.
Go ahead, Claire.
Just in reference to this, I know that the way that people protest is something that comes up a lot, and regardless of my opinions, I mean, personally, I would like everybody to be released. But the question that I have, that regardless of how we personally feel about how people should protest or how we choose to respond to the way people choose to protest, doesn't COVID-19 affect the way that we choose determine who gets released from jail? Because even before the protests began, there was a pretty strong movement to try to release as many people as possible from jails to
as possible. Because you're exactly right, Claire. That's
so whether they're peaceful, or even if they were looters, like they're still, you know, that's COVID is definitely does change.
That's correct. Now, those people, however, were people who had been convicted and were serving sentences. So it came up in whatever, you know, any given jurisdiction for their governance to decide who they were going to free. And they were letting people out who were determined to be nonviolent criminals. Those were who were released. In this case, because the district attorney has pledged not to prosecute, we should be looking to the people that we're talking about should be people who have not yet been arraigned, because when you go to arraignment is when the DA charges you officially and the judge accepts or denies those charges, and you're either prosecuted at that point or you're dismissed right there by the judge. So we're looking to people who have been arrested but not yet processed, in my mind.
I agree. And a lot of these things are no bail. I mean, now with the new reforms and the law changed, protesting, they get arrested because they've resisted arrest, they've disrupted the peace, whatever. All that would all be no bail. So why in God's name are they even being taken in the time of COVID?
Right. Now, the problem potentially is with sometimes these delayed arraignments. So speaking of Black people, men, whatever, however you want to classify it, who've been murdered in this city, right? We have the young man that spent over a year on Rikers Island awaiting arraignment for a crime he'd never committed, over a stolen backpack that he didn't steal. And he killed himself because they put him in solitary confinement for like a year. So
over.
So if people are going to be processed duly as they're supposed to, right, as the law says that they're supposed to,
then they shouldn't be there that long. But there is a potential for it to happen, and it has happened right here in New York City on Rikers Island.
Okay, I just want to jump in. So what are we proposing?
So do you want to just leave the word protesters to the rest of the committee, or do you want to put any type of adjective before that?
So let's have some other people chime in. Who wants to give us their opinion?
I vote to leave it just as protesters, but what did everybody else say? Do a quick vote, and then we could, or do a quick raise your hand or say something.
Well, I want to say that if there is anyone who objects to leaving it as protesters, speak up, please. If we have no one speak up, we can just leave it as protesters.
Okay.
I don't see any hands. All right. So I still would like to know, all right, so what we're saying, or what we're proposing, is that we take the presentation that Taylor and Katie and Claire put together, and we just turn it into a resolution, minusing out part about
No, I
the
would do that. I would actually include number one, Lucian. I think I like the idea of giving a condolences, how we put it in words that make sense to us. And we support Black Lives Matter. I'm good with everything that's said here. We support some police.
No, we have to put in support Black Lives Matter.
Yeah,
It's in here. Just support it.
I'm saying we need
No, as a standalone, it has to.
Okay, Francis. Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
And then keep going with all.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, the problem is that you can't all talk at the same time because I'm not understanding where we're going. So what I said is, are we taking the presentation and turning it into a reso, except we want to take out the part about the memorial, which was suggested by Justine. And then I heard Francis say we want to put in, it is in there, that we support Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, it's all in there.
All right, so I'm not understanding what the objection is. The only part
Take out the part about the memorial? Well, I don't understand. What is
Why are we taking that out? Can we go to the memorial, the second page, Lucian?
Who's controlling it? Is
Yeah,
Katie controlling it?
Taylor, are you controlling it?
These are my notes, and I took these from the presentation that was shared for me. I just put the two resolutions that they proposed. And I didn't copy over the memorial stuff, so I can give me a minute and I can get that over here too.
Thank you, Lucian. I was going to ask also if it's required to be in resolution format. The two things that we didn't state as like resolutions, if they need to also be stated resolutions, then yeah, we stand with that. The two things were the memorials and then starting a committee specifically talking about race and justice.
I support that. I don't know if we can make that a resolution.
With that.
I think we have to continue the conversation. I don't know what form it will take. Like I said, it could be the entire, borough of Manhattan. It could just be CB1. I know that CB8 was interested. I think CB8 had a resolution that they had worked on already. Let me see if I have that. And that we might.
I guess my change to number 3 would be provide space for a memorial in CB1 with the names of unnamed Black Americans, and just take out Battery Park City unless some people don't agree with me. Just make it broader. Doesn't mean it won't be Battery Park City, but it's a broad.
I'm fine with that, but again, I prefer that if we had some sort of not memorial, whatever we want to call it, at each of these locations where they would be.
Yeah, and maybe we could put it in there to say, isn't there a memorial, some sort of we have a task group. Betty K.
Street fairs and signage or something.
So maybe we can maybe just say we provide space for memorial within Community Board District 1 as fleshed out by that task force. And so we can have that conversation there versus here, because we need more people to talk about it, right?
Can everyone hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
You know how up and down Broadway they have in the sidewalk little
on pavement on the
yeah, exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Little historical notations, who did what when. I suggest that we approach the city about putting, I love Mariama's idea that, this was the slave market and these were homes that, housed the Underground Railroad and, all of the notations. Why don't we approach the city about actually coming up with some way of doing that?
Okay, I'm gonna really throw something in here. Why don't we approach Howard Hughes and tell him to put something over in the seaport where the slave quarters were?
It definitely belongs over there too.
And yeah,
We can. I don't.
Hi, the city
does
already does historical plaques.
it go in this resolution, or is it a
Yes. Katie and Taylor and Claire say yes. Thank you.
Sarah's raising her hand.
Hi. The city already does the historical plaques, and there's an Underground Railroad stop on the corner of Lispenard and Church Street where the coffee place is. That building is one. Even if it's an extension of that existing program, there's no reason it can't happen.
that's a great idea. So it exists.
No, Sarah, if that plaque was paid for by personal funds from some organization, or was that something that the city
No, I
did?
think it's a
And
city program because of the very same type of plaque appears in many places, like the first Thomas's English Muffin Bakery, Seasick Village.
Approach the city
Chelsea, rather.
about starting a program where they actually put plaques and historical notations of what occurred in this location. So now, do we include that in this reso, or is that a separate ask that we send out a letter and possibly, again, I think that we need to use our borough president, who is extremely helpful in many cases. And I'm sure that if we presented this to her, she would be equally interested in pursuing it.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. The city council has a Black caucus also we may want to talk to.
I think that's a great idea.
I have a recommendation for
Okay,
the
Lucian.
committee's consideration. There's a number of items here that are very time sensitive, such as police reform and legislation, executive orders, as well as the budget conversation that's going on that will fundamentally could or has the potential to fundamentally change the NYPD, depending on what compromise is drawn out between the mayor and city council. So those are things that I would recommend putting forth a resolution this month. A resolution to stand with the protesters, Black Lives Matter, to advocate for the humane treatment of protesters, people who are expressing their freedom of speech. That's definitely timely. And the third, the memorials, that's something that I think the committee can put more thought into, think about what programs exist, and really put forth something that is a little bit more baked.
I would agree.
So can we put that back on for next month, Lucian?
Lucian, by putting
I
this
will.
by keeping this in with this thing, it doesn't preclude us from then doing something more specific after that, does it?
No, but I don't think anything precludes. I think you'll keep the momentum going by every month revisiting the subject instead of kind of getting it all out and then not having anything else to talk about here. But also, there's some other committees that you might want to work with on this.
I just thought that the young ladies had such nice things, like to include everything they did in one lump sum for the work that they put in. I just thought it might be a nice thing,
There's monuments. There's already been an enormous amount of work on monuments, and so I'd like to get a little bit background. So I think you guys could really be more surgical about how to approach that, because the borough president had a monuments experts convened, and I think that it'd be good to know what the pipeline looks like, and then say this is how it should be supplemented, and this is what it doesn't look at, and I think there's a way to really have them take that.
I understand.
Sober look.
Thank you. I understand.
I want to do again. If anyone disagrees with that, with us taking off the third item and holding it until next month, pursuing it, separately, speak up now. I don't hear anyone. Not everything can be addressed in one. Is that Mimi? Mimi, was that you?
No, I took off mine because I don't disagree with this. I was waiting till you were done with this item. I just wanted to draw everybody's attention to the fact that Cora shared all the information for the correct name is actually the Black, Latino, and Asian, or BLA caucus of the City Council, which consists of 26 of the 51 total members of the City Council. She's listed some phone numbers, the chairs of that committee, it looks like, and the email address to reach them at.
Listen to me, everyone. No one has objected to moving number 3 to next month.
Agreed.
They can speak to the the caucus of the City Council. We can speak to the borough president. We can get some other some advice from other people on how we might proceed. And again, I still think it's very important to include other community boards. The other thing we can address next month is Mitch's proposal that street names, is changes of street names. So we might want to reach out, once again, I said, to the community boards where those streets live, and see if they want to work with us. And we might have streets in our own in Manhattan. I'm not sure. We might have some streets.
Pat, I sent you the email with that information in Fort Hamilton, Brooklyn.
Okay, great, thank you. So right now, what's on the table is that we're going to turn points 1 and 2 into a reso. Does anyone object to that? Does everyone understand what we're turning into a reso? If anyone objects, speak now. I see Taylor. Taylor, you have your hand up?
Yes, I had my hand up before because I just wanted to ask how we could start a working group that maybe could turn into a committee to continue this conversation, or would that happen in this committee? And that was my hand raised, but
I don't really have an answer for you. I think that, like you said, next month we would like to continue this conversation and take some action on your point number 3. I think tomorrow night we have the executive committee meeting, and you might want to attend that. And I definitely am going to introduce your topic tomorrow at the executive committee meeting, and you might want to be there to say a few words and possibly ask that question there. I don't really have an answer for you.
I would just say that this sounds like this committee is already doing the work. I mean, it sounds like this is the committee.
She was talking about a subcommittee to specifically focus on the racial and intersectional issues.
Yeah,
this committee doesn't really do that.
We have other topics that
with all that we do, not to diminish anything, we don't really there has not been a focus specifically on intersectionality or LGBTQ issues, period, and that I've witnessed in my time on the board.
Yes,
thank you. To do that. So like I said, we could either decide that that's something we want to take up and have our own form a task force to pursue that topic. But again, we can discuss this tomorrow night at the executive committee and get some input from some other members of the board. Right now, can we just finish this reso? And Taylor,
yes,
I don't know if that is.
Sorry.
Taylor, I don't know if that's a question.
Yes,
we're
that
not
answers
let
the questions.
We're going to pursue it. We will, and we're going to keep you involved. You and your sister and your cousin involved. All right. So no one has objected to us taking points 1 and 2 and turning them into a reso. Does everyone see what they are? I don't hear anyone saying no, so I think everyone sees what they are. How shall we do this? Shall we have a vote that we want to go forward with this as a reso, or if anyone objects to it being a reso, speak now. If no one objects, we're going to turn it into a reso from our committee. Okay, we're doing it. I don't see any objections. I don't hear any objections. So it is becoming a resolution committee, and then next month we will go forward with the discussion about memorials, street names, and anything between now and then that we can come up with. We'll also discuss Again, we'll discuss this at tomorrow's executive committee. And Mariama, we might want to talk about forming a task force in quality of life. All right?
Yeah, that sounds great. Pat?
Should I read through the names?
Pat?
You have to read the names to get a vote. Is that what you just said, Lucian?
Yeah.
I have a question before.
Want to say something?
On the agenda, number 5 has state of policing in New York City, discussion and possible resolution. That's included in this, so that's not a separate one, right? So we're including that topic from the agenda in this resolution, so we don't need to have another resolution.
Right, I think we can say that we've included it. And then next month we might want to add, because again, every day, every minute, as
something else is happening.
Pointed out, legislation is happening, the city level, the state level, the federal level. So I think next month we'll still have a huge topic to discuss.
Specifically to policing, right?
Okay, so yeah, because this is a little light on the state of policing. This particular resolution, there's no specific critiques. There's no specific critiques on observed police tactics or policies.
So I think we would either need to have a discussion about that or make it a separate resolution and take it up in July.
Okay.
Or because I think what we have here is good. It's good, it's general, it's timely, but I think there's more to it, because at the end of the day, what I think that the girls were getting to, but I think at least for me it's important, part of the deal is as the new laws are put into place and take effect, how do they work? What does it mean? They're disbanding some anti-crime task force. How does this all work? We want them to take some money from the police force and put it to social programs. All of these things are things that I'm hoping this new working group or whatever it's going to be is going to work on to come up with. So I think it's going to be resolution after resolution after resolutions that's going to happen over the next year.
It's important for us to get our borough president involved in this discussion and get some leadership from her and her office.
I agree with you, because it's way bigger than just Community Board 1.
Would it be okay if this part 3 of point 3 of part 1, which talks about police reform legislation, because this is kind of this is a bit bumpy, and specifically that New York State passed all 10 bills, and I believe the governor signed all 10. NYC has a number of bills under consideration. The federal government is actually politically, right now, looks to be politically deadlocked with the Republican-held Senate having a vastly different.
Maybe we leave the federal government out of it.
So you could say that support of police reform at all levels of government, and just because you're kind of leaving it vague, and then you can be more specific next month when you look at the police tactics under a microscope.
I like the sound of that, because I'd like us at some point, if the Senate doesn't, make a change on their own, to call upon the Senate. I mean, we have representatives of the Senate here too, to call upon the Senate to pass the House's bill, basically.
Agreed.
So again, it's 8:45. We have to move on. So no one objected to that being our resolution. So ladies, Taylor and Katie and Claire, again, it was fabulous. Thank you for starting or continuing this conversation. You're fabulous. Don't feel nervous. As Tammy said, every time you do the presentation, you'll get a little more comfortable. And if you'd like, tomorrow night, we have the executive committee meeting, and you might just want to tune in, and depending on how the meeting is going, I may ask you to say a word or two. Okay?
Yes, thank you guys so much. Appreciate you all.
Thank you, Taylor.
And make sure you'll be here next month as we continue the topic and conversation. Okay?
We'll be here. We'll be here. Thank you, guys.
Pat, I got the vote sheet out if you want me to call the roll on this.
Well, what I actually had said is if no one objects, but if you want to call, if we have to do it formally, then okay, call the roll.
Pat?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Pat Moore? Okay. Mariama?
Yes.
Mark Amaruso, Thomas Burton, Fern Cunningham, Mimi Flynn,
Yes.
Justine Kucha,
Yes.
Francis Curtis, Francis.
I don't see her sitting by her desk there.
But she didn't object before, so I would think you can put it down as a yes.
We'll come back. Mitch Froman,
Yes, sir.
Betty Kay,
Yes.
Michael Kettering, Bob Schneck.
Yes.
Okay. The measure passes.
Yay.
Now, let's see. Again, it's almost 9 o'clock.
Did we get the public members?
No.
Sorry.
They
I
here?
didn't scroll down that far. Jill.
Yes. Yes.
Good. Sorry about that. Diane?
I don't see Diane.
Everybody said yes.
Great. And thank you, everyone, for the great conversation. Okay, I'm just looking at the agenda. I think that we can. Okay, Mariama, didn't you bring the pepper spray before?
No.
Betty, I believe.
Who suggested banning pepper spray? I think we can save. Betty, was that you?
Yes. Throughout the workday.
Do you mind if we hold that topic for next month and include it with the topic about the police and defunding and how they police from now on?
But it was with regard to COVID, right? Not with regard to the police, if I read it right.
Yeah, I think that she was.
Actually,
Go ahead, Patty.
I can speak for myself. The issue specifically about, and it's really all chemical irritants, is that one, they are very abusive to the person. I mean, they really hurt, and I don't think they're fair in that realm. But they also cause people to put hands up to their faces and their eyes, which is the worst place to put your hands unless they're clean at a time like COVID. But also they think that the vehicle of the gas itself is something that the particles can carry on, making those who inhale it more likely to pick up ambient COVID particles. So it's on many levels.
The air?
Yes, that they know that in the air it will adhere, much as they found it does to exhaust from engines, to pollution. Those studies, same thing with gas particles that are out there as an aerosol. Any other COVID particles in the air will adhere to it and be more likely to carry along with it.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I guess we can just write a quick resolution.
Sounds great.
Back to that. So Betty, would you like to wording?
What would be used?
Advance. I'll certainly help Lucian later with the finer points, but I think really they should ban the use of chemical irritants. Actually, not only against protests, but against protesters and all other people, especially at this time of COVID-19, where it's an especially large risk.
I think particularly because they claim not to use any. AG Barr claimed that they hadn't even used any, although it's come out that they have.
They finally admitted it, though.
If you're saying you didn't use any, then why should you have a problem with us banning them? So let's go ahead and do it.
Betty, can I just ask you? I agree with you 100%. I'm just like, do you have an answer for then what would be a substitute, a non-lethal substitute? Because we don't want them using batons or actually their other more deadly weapons. So what would be like an alternative? And like I said, I agree with you in principle, but I'm just, I don't want them to have to use more deadly force.
Now that they've really ratcheted down the force, they're finding no problems from the protesters. So it's being used inappropriately anyway.
Okay, no, I agree with you. I just don't want them to have an excuse to say, well, we don't have this, so we got to use a baton, you know, that type of thing.
I think if we have to suggest a replacement, why wouldn't we suggest what he claimed to have been using, that he said was not a chemical irritant?
Okay. Even though he lied, though, yeah.
I think even what he claimed he was using is a chemical irritant, because I think that there's like levels. I was reading something, and then Claire wrote something in the chat, but I was thinking that there's tear gas, and then there's something that's not called tear gas, but it really makes you tear. I think they're all chemical irritants, and they're all basically meant to disperse.
Why don't we include tear gas with the pepper spray in Betty's resolution also?
That is exactly what a chemical irritant is. It also includes mace.
Okay.
So it's a sweeping term that includes all those things, and it's well known. They're all
Okay,
chemical
great.
irritants.
Okay.
They're trying to make people reach for their eyes and cough, because that will make them physically pause.
It'll make them stop what they're doing. And also, as Tim wrote, which I think I agree with, is tear gas is not allowed as a weapon in war. It's
Correct.
So
Isn't that ridiculous? Yes, it's not allowed in war, but it's used.
Yeah, it's totally
city streets.
Okay, I'm good with that. I agree with that. I'm good with that, Betty.
So Betty, I think we should include that in the reso, that if it's not allowed as a weapon of war, why is it allowed to be used by any police force in the United States against its citizens?
Agreed.
Right?
Well, I think it certainly should not be used on a civilian population of peaceful protesters.
100%. Okay. 100%. Yes.
Basically, I mean, short to the point resolution. No, so you said you'll work with Lucian about it?
Yes, no problem.
Okay, great, thank you. So again, if anyone objects to this resolution, please speak now. Okay, Lucian, do we need to take a roll call?
We all agree.
I know, but Mitch, let Lucian.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
I think he's typing.
Yeah.
I see him typing notes.
Okay. Thank you. Just for completeness sake, I'd like to call the roll. Okay, Pat?
Yes.
Mariama?
Yes.
Mark Amoruso, Tom Burton, Fern Cunningham, Mimi Flynn?
Yes.
Christine Kucha?
Yes.
Francis Curtis?
Yes.
Francis, you were a yes in the other vote as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, Mitch Froman?
Yes.
Betty Kay?
Yes.
Michael Kettering, Robert Sneck?
Yes.
Down to public members, Jill Goodkind?
Yes.
Diane Stein? And Jeffrey Dietrich, by the way, which he's not here. Okay, thank you. This passes as well.
Okay, great, thank you. And then you and Betty will work on the language. And again, it doesn't have to be that long, because I think it's it can be right to the point. What else do we have? This policing, okay, we've decided. So I think that's it.
Well, there's one thing, and that is not a resolution, but just to get your comments together for tomorrow's meeting on the open dining on the sidewalk.
Number one.
Concerns.
They've already started by me, like one of the items that came before licensing and permits that we actually denied at 77 Fulton Street for Keste Wall Street. They've started, I guess, under this new sort of opportunity to build, tables. Go outside. They built about 15 tables there that it looks that they're tall, so it looks like they're going to put stools by them. Yeah. People will sit in stools.
Today. Oh.
Yep.
Jumping the gun
on Gold Street.
And there's very little mask wearing and very little social distancing in the ones that I've seen so far.
But it's in the exact location that they brought before licensing and permits that we denied. And they were supposed to go back and speak to John Fratta, because he was one of the people who was supporting it, try to work with him for them to go back to the drawing board.
I thought that people were only allowed to use space outside their establishment if they had it before. Otherwise, they were using parking lots and others.
They may have jumped the gun, but they built a bunch of tables today.
Because they weren't approved they don't have any kind of approval. Oh, anyway. I mean,
Everyone,
actually, I had
they
this
did. They had a denial. They had an official denial from our committee, not
right.
to.
I brought this up with Susan. We knew we were gonna have this problem with people who
Everyone,
were,
hold on. Listen, you there?
Uh-huh.
Did you have some sort of presentation, or did you have something you wanted to share with us before we had the discussion?
The only thing I can share is that there is this idea of using the public right of way for extended dining area, because in phase two, whenever we do get to phase two, which is yet unclear, restaurants will allowed to have sit-in dining, but only at 50% capacity. So the idea is to have the balance of the capacity made up by potentially allowing dining either on the sidewalk if the sidewalk is wide enough, or within the curb lane. So because this is a conversation that goes across many, many different committees, we are having all the committees discuss this and the implications. So we had transportation discuss it, the small business working group discuss it, and of course, the quality of life committee should also discuss certain pitfalls that may come up, that, and all these discussions will lead to a resolution that comes out of executive tomorrow. That way, not any committee is left out of having the opportunity to talk about this.
okay, so my first comment would be, hopefully it would be in terms of a comment from all the community boards as a borough-wide resolution, that all the people seeking to do that have to get clearance or check in with the community board, because we're the ones that know our areas. And if somebody is gonna stretch out and do something outrageous, we're the ones that can monitor it.
But I think that's the problem, that I think the mayor it's kind of the mayor, isn't it, Lucian? Isn't it kind of the mayor's initiative, and they're not necessarily going to check in with?
Yes, ultimately, that it should be something that the mayor does, but the mayor has been very cagey with details. He's been very late in terms of giving us timelines for when he thinks that we'll move into phase two, or what will happen in phase two. So it's very much still, it seems like it's on their drawing table, because it doesn't feel fully baked on their end.
I just want to point out that Cora is noting in the
Right.
chat that there are several agencies who are involved in permitting the outdoor dining applications. And the community boards are not included on that list. So I don't know if they got permission or not, but on Gold Street today, I saw several tables having been built where the licensing and permits committee had said they could not be, that we were not allowing a sidewalk cafe for that restaurant. So
I think definitely should take that to Susan, number one. But before anything else, I wanted to say, Lucia, are these restaurants going to be treated as outdoor cafes? Are they going to have the same type of limitations? And are we going to be able to discuss the hours? Are we going to be able, I know, they can't have that many tables because they have to practice social distancing.
Right. Unclear.
Do you have any?
Unclear. And what we've seen in other cities, and the best I can do is tell you what other cities have done, because I can only assume that the administration is doing the same thing. And that is, there are some restaurants that, whatever guidelines are given, have done some dining on tables. Some cities have shut down entire streets, so kind of like Mulberry Street in Italy during the warmer months, when that street is shut down for dining in the street. The other idea is to have something that's akin to street seats, but allowing the restaurant to serve directly from the street seats. The current street seat program does not allow for a restaurant to, I believe, have table service. It has to kind of act at like public seating that's agnostic to the restaurant, but it can be essentially adjacent to the restaurant on the street. So that could be another. So converting the curb lane in some way to additional dining space.
Right. And Lucian.
Oh my God, Gold Street curb.
So both Betty and Cora have shared comments in the chat and with regard to this topic, that just to point it out to everybody.
Right, I see that. So if we can include the word temporary in whatever resolution we do, that I think that'll be a good coordination.
What does this mean to self-certify online? Register and self-certify online.
So that it sounds like they're just getting permit. Maybe Cora can explain it, but it sounds like they're getting permission, to set up the temporary outdoor dining program, and it bypasses the community boards. I'm sure all of us just wanting to be able to circle back after all of this is done and be able to actually permit or not whoever, restaurants wanting a sidewalk cafe. Like, this should not segue into permanent sidewalk cafes.
That would be my
Looks
concern.
like it expires in October.
Yeah, Betty says it expires October 2020, October 31st, 2020.
But we can still include a language in it just to be extra, detail oriented.
Guys, please, let's, hands up or one at a time. So now, Cora, are you there and can we speak to you?
Let me make sure Cora's up. Hold on a second. Cora, you can unmute yourself now.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you,
Oh,
Cora.
hello.
Hi, Cora.
Wow, I can talk. I am alive. How can I help? That is what I know. This is what DOT, DCA, Department of Consumer Affairs and Workers Protection. Actually, that is a new name. DCWP, no longer DCA, but I was just taking the shortcut. And also Department of Health, Small Business Services, they are all working on those details, trying to finalize a plan. Our office got lots of phone calls. They all ask, can I put the chairs? Can I use this table? Can I use the sidewalk? I've been chasing down agencies looking for answers. I try to ask, how about places that are restricted, like don't even think about it? Would you know? Do you already have those information? So then we don't have to waste time trying to think that maybe City Hall Park can work. No, they don't have that kind of information either. They are working on finalizing the details. So we have to wait and to be a little patient. So the question that you just asked, like, what does that mean is self-certify? I don't have the answer. That is a good question. But that is only a recap of what they're trying to do because there are multiple agencies involved. So we do need to give them some time. They also, at the same time, have to hurry up. Councilmember Chin has been advocating to SBS. The process has to be simple. The process of registering, getting the information, letting them doing the startup, it has to be simple for the restaurant owners. It has to be simple for the small business owners. So that's she's been advocating for.
And Cora, I think that really what you just said lends itself to the idea of self-certification. Self-certify in the planning world, specifically at Department of Buildings, indicates that someone who's filed an application is saying that it complies with the code. So they're saying that, and an examiner doesn't have to go through necessarily and cross-check it with the code. So self-certification is akin to a promise that this does adhere to all the guidelines and restrictions.
So basically,
it's a way of expediting the package, so they don't have to wait for its turn in the queue to be given a green light for whatever step they have to take.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think the temporary term is going to, for them right now, they're thinking about September. But still, everything is still talking, but what I've heard is September.
What I think that we are hearing is that truthfully the community boards are not going to be involved in this process.
Can I
That's what it
speak?
sounds.
Why? Well, they're two different things though. Open Streets is one program. This outdoor dining program is a different program. Although kind of they are related when you have the open street, because there's some restaurant owners asking, well, the street is already closed. Can I do this? But this is not just something you just put the chairs and tables out there. There's Department of Health involved as well. So Pat, I'm not sure if I understand your question correctly, because if you're talking about open streets, the community board is involved, and then everyone actually can go to the DOT website and submit their suggestion. It doesn't have to go for the community board, right? So
It was about, closing people to walk. So I'm talking about the restaurants moving outside, and it sounds as though the community board, and then Betty, we'll get you in a minute, but it sounds as though the community board is not going to be really involved in that process. That the city is going to let restaurants self-certify, register and self-certify.
So tell me more if community board is involved. Are you saying it's like the licensing, licensing and permits kind of process that they have to go through the community board?
Can I please speak?
Would that
I can answer a lot of this question.
further delay the process?
Yeah, Cora, hold on, because Betty said she has an answer to this question. So, Betty?
Transportation Committee, this is what happened this month at the committee. Kimberly Rancour, who is in the Manhattan Commissioner DOT's office, will be in charge, seems to be in charge of the program. She's speaking tomorrow at
of which program? Of which program, Betty? The outdoor dining program or the
outdoor
street
dining? Yes, I'm not talking about cafe dining, because that's run, as it always has been, by a different group, and licensing handles it. The DOT is involved because the mayor pulled that in with the mayor's program and said, use the open streets program that the mayor had already called for, expand the street seats that the borough president wanted, and that was expanded. Again, that's DOT permission. It's all about right-of-way space. So the DOT is really the driver in this because they grant space. There will be no other permissions from other agencies. It will be the DOT. They came to us, Transportation, because they wanted to know the community board's input, and it's going to be discussed tomorrow at Executive Committee, what came up from that and here, because they want guidance on what the community board wants. They have done this from other community boards as well through their transportation committees. They do not have the time, is their feeling. When they get individual applications, they have to act on them and act on them quickly. The mayor has asked there be no process like typical, which takes up to a year to get through. The DOT will be acting on applications as they come through. They want guidance. That's exactly tomorrow what they're putting together from all the committees to put forward the final advice document that's going to go to DOT.
So tomorrow,
okay. So to be clear, it sounds like what you just described does not apply to the restaurant on the corner of Gold and Fulton, because that's not in the middle of a street. It's not an open or a closed street. It is Southbridge Towers property, technically, leading up into a part of the sidewalk. I'm not sure exactly where the border is, where the city picks up the rest of the sidewalk, and it's city property. And that is where they were wanting to put, and where they have put, their outdoor seating. And that is where licensing and permits had said, no, you may not. And rather than give them an outright, like we're not a rejection resolution, we sent it back to John Fratta, the Southbridge Towers board president, to see what else he could work out with them and then they could come back. But what their application as put forth to us right before COVID, the pandemic and the closure of the board, and offices and agencies all over the country, we had sent that message back, and then we didn't meet again on that topic.
So that particular location is not part of this discussion. And
that sounds like it falls under what Cora was describing, and that maybe they've gotten some sort of permission from one or more city agencies, or maybe not. They may have jumped the gun and done this thing on their own.
Cora, this program hasn't started yet, right?
No, all these DOT and they call it sister agencies are working to finalize the details.
So if there's a restaurant that's already put up tables, which there is on the corner of Fulton and Gold, then they would have done so of their own accord and not with permission of an agency. Is that correct?
Yes. I think there are many community members seeing many other restaurants, many other places around town, not just Manhattan, but the whole New York City is doing that.
Yeah, smells like bull poo poo for Kesty.
Okay.
Sounds like
I'll send you some pictures, Lucian.
Oh, yes, please.
Do that. All right, separate conversation. Betty, so DOT has not really moved. This program has not started yet.
DOT is going online on Friday for starting the application process.
Yeah, because all of this is supposed to be in phase 2, and we're not even out of phase 1 yet.
That's going to happen, and they predict in about a week.
22nd, right, is the beginning of phase 2?
They're planning to have this program to be implemented during phase 2.
Right.
Today is Wednesday. A few more days if we all work hard to just make sure we don't mess up the numbers,
Okay.
Hospitalization and others.
Hold on, everybody. Lucian, why are we having this discussion if community boards are going to be part of the process?
You went out, Pat.
You can't hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Lucian, why are we having this discussion if the community boards are not going to be part of the process?
Yeah, right.
Now, this is at the beginning of the month. We went from knowing zero, it was just an idea, to now at the end of the month, there seems to be some sort of plan coming together. But with, I mean, not to paint the entire administration with this one brush, but it's not been the hallmark for plans coming together quickly with a lot of guidance. So in typical fashion, especially during the pandemic, it seems like a lot of the details are still being decided upon. And even with this, I think there's always a possibility that even when they say it's finalized, that there's still opportunity for changes to the program, because this is not going in via legislation that's voted. This looks like it's going to be an executive program. And the other part of it is that they may not be ready when they say they're ready. So I think that we still even may be able to have a resolution in before this is officially rolled out. So I think that no matter what, our resolution from CB1 will be worthwhile.
All right, just give us some guidelines, though. I'm still not quite sure I understand how we can impact the process.
I think
would you want us to, are we talking about us identifying streets? Are we talking about us?
Just from a quality of life perspective, what are some pitfalls that could be avoided if they were to craft this program correctly? So, for example, Francis said the community board should be included in the approval and oversight. And I think that, you can either dig into what oversight looks like, how can we report bad actors, improper installations where social distancing is not being is not the point of maybe certain restaurants installation, restaurants that are invading public space if they are to maintain a certain amount of sidewalk and they're not doing so. We have to have a clear idea of we're taking this to. Is there one agency that's going to be the show on this, or do we have to kind of balkanize every kind of comment to every single other agency? So I think that we can certainly speak to what a perfect version of a small business saving policy be, but within reason, given what you know as a quality of life committee.
Well, one issue that always comes up is when you have outdoor cafes, it's limiting the hours, and because there are potentially residents that live above it and they can't, we don't want noise all hours of the night so that they can't enjoy their homes and their sleep.
Right.
I mean,
that was the reason why he was denied.
Right. So I think the most important point would be that it should be, again, we've said this over and over at transportation and at licensing, that any of these things should be temporary. In no way should it be implicit that a restaurant is going to have any opportunity to just continue without public engagement and comment the way any other permit would be issued under normal, circumstances and times.
So to put it to kind of take what you said, Pat, the hours being really important. The licensing committee painstakingly negotiates hours for sidewalk cafes every time. If they were to, as a rule, roll out hours that are much more permissive than what the good actors are adhering to, they've essentially taken all the work of the community board and thrown it out the window. So one thing could be, like you're saying, the hours are an issue. If we say the hours should resemble that which all their neighbors have sidewalk cafe wise, because the community board one's very deliberate in the hours that they allow.
Agreed. But I think also in stressing the temporariness of it, but I think that people are open to maybe a little bit of leeway for their business neighbors. And so okay, I prefer not to hear noise under my window, but for a couple months I can tolerate it because I want my neighboring, businesses, small businesses to survive and to bounce back. But if it has to be clear that it's a temporary thing, that may just be my personal feeling. But I think that people would be more open to relaxing some of the rules, as the government has been, at all levels, to relaxing some of the rules in this regard, but certainly not to make it permanent, and never to take away the public's opportunity to weigh in on what it is they want, beyond the community board itself.
At this day and time, most people are home. And so even though I fully agree that somehow businesses have to open again, but most people are at home basically 24/7 because they are not going into their offices, and they're going to be impacted even more than they would normally be by the noise that could potentially come from an outdoor restaurant. So, I mean, it's just one thing to take into consideration. You might be right.
Point well taken. To that point, I think what people are having a lot of trouble with is these fireworks that we didn't discuss. I don't know if they're going to come under any committee, but it's 4,000 illegal fireworks sales are up 4,000% according to the governor, and in everywhere we're hearing them all the time. So I don't know.
Another 9/17, 9/18, and I got to call my 92-year-old mother before she goes to bed. So again, does anyone else have anything? We're going to have this discussion tomorrow as executive committee. You all are welcome to tune in and speak there. Does anyone have anything else that we would like to present as a committee to the executive committee for discussion about this topic? Limiting time, limiting them being, they cannot be permanent structures, or or I think they have permanent license to be an outdoor cafe after the time period is over. Does anyone have anything else they would like to add? Okay, nothing. All right. Conclusion. I think we've exhausted that topic. So
Yes,
the only
Stephanie,
thing I
very
have
good.
Great, thank you. The only thing I have to say to the committee, if you first of all, you know, we've discussed it that next month we're going to go forward with a discussion about the monuments and street names, and possibly getting community boards, all the community boards in Manhattan involved with some sort of town hall. If you have any other topics that you want to bring to quality of life, as I always say, this, you know, you are the committee members. You should bring topics. Mariama, you might want to put fireworks on for next month. I don't know if
perhaps we should. And Claire added in the chat a request to ask NYPD to wear masks. We may want to consider.
Yeah, I would have that one too. Yep, I think that's a good thing to add too.
So that's in our notes for next month. All right, I think we're done. Everyone, thank you for your participation. Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.
Again tomorrow night.
Bye, everyone.
See you tomorrow.
Yeah, see you
Everybody. Sorry. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justine.
No.
Lovely girls.
My lovely girls. Oh, my lovely girls. They are.
Yes.
After school, I was starving.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to them because I really think their voices needed to be heard, and I appreciate it because.
Oh, no, cool. It was excellent. Very good.
I'm so glad, Francis. All right.